Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about What If Deku had Beast Quirk Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝗵𝗃 from AO3. So let's start the video. Izuku wiped his eyes as he walked down the street. Mere minutes ago, his soul had been shattered. All Might, his favorite hero, and the best hero of all time, told him being a quirkless hero was impossible. It was unrealistic. That word got to him worse than anything else. Unrealistic. Wanting to help people was unrealistic for a quirkless person. If Izuku had to keep things realistic, he may as well follow Kaken's advice. It wasn't like quirkless people of the past generation lived very long, anyways. An explosion a block away caught his attention. He turned and saw a crowd being ushered away by 𝗵𝗃. Kamui Woods was trying to grab something Izuku couldn't see, but gave a shout of pain and pulled back a bunch of burning branches. Was there a fire villain? His prior depression forgotten, Izuku rushed towards the scene to see what was going on. When he reached the square, he saw Backdraft working to keep the fire contained while 𝗵𝗃 kept having to convince the crowds to stay back. 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗄 was standing uselessly to one side while Kamui reached out, risking more burns, at a huge, sludge monster. Wasn't that the villain that 𝗬𝗏? Izuku must have made All Might drop him. How could he be so useless? Looking further, Izuku found the source of the explosions that kept burning Kamui Woods. Kaken! Izuku screamed in horror. His friend, Bikuga Katsuki, was caught in the sludge. The blonde teen was screaming and flailing his hands, doing everything he could to try burning the sludge villain. The villain just laughed and kept trying to pull him in deeper. He was going to die. Without even thinking, Izuku charged at the villain. He needed to help him. He couldn't just let Kaken die. He rushed past the crowd, zigzagging between bystanders, and past 𝗵𝗃. Kamui and Backdraft were too busy working to notice the green teen zoom past them. However, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗄, who had been uselessly standing like an animatronic in a pizzeria, saw him and caught Izuku by the scruff of his collar. "Let me go." Izuku struggled. "I'm not about to let a kid like you get hurt." 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗄 shouted, trying to restrain Izuku. "But Kaken is dying." Izuku screamed. "I gotta help." He reached out his arms, feebly trying to get free. Kaken. If Izuku had been under any less stress, he would have felt a tingling across his body. He would have noticed his face aching just the slightest bit. He would have realized his hearing got sharper. He would have felt his tighten before a quiet rip was heard. He would have noticed so much, had he not been focused on saving Bikuga Katsuki. Instead, all Izuku saw was a pair of long, furry arms reaching out across the area to grab the struggling teen. From their angle, Izuku could only assume they came from someone behind him, but who? He didn't recognize these arms, and certainly no fuzzy hero was around 𝗵𝗃. Izuku watched as these arms gripped Bikuga, and Izuku could almost feel them in his own hands. The arms retracted, pulling Bikuga free from the sludge. The villain screamed in rage and moved to take him back, but found himself impeded by Kamui Woods and 𝗵𝗃. With no more fire and a contained crowd, the two heroes made quick work of beating the villain into 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏. The fuzzy hands released Bikuga at this point and retracted, exiting Izuku's sight. Bikuga just stared at Izuku with a dumbfounded expression the green boy had never seen before. In a few more minutes, things had calmed down. Bikuga was taken away by paramedics while Kamui rushed over. Both he and 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗄, who had released Izuku a few moments prior, were glaring down at the boy. "What were you thinking?" Kamui Woods scolded. "Kaken was in danger." Izuku shouted back. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing." "Maybe so," 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗄 shook his head, "but that's no excuse to use your quirk without a license." "What? What do you mean?" Izuku asked, completely confused. "Your arms." Kamui pointed. You can't just use your quirk like that. But, I'm quirkless, 𝐒𝐬𝐽 stated. Both heroes looked at each other, then back to 𝐒𝐬𝐽. Evidently not, 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐵 growled. I'm not lying. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 shrieked as he yanked his student ID from his coat. Here, look at my ID. It clearly says dash. He stopped. The hand holding out his ID was not his own. It was one of the fuzzy ones that pulled Bakugo from the sludge. 𝐒𝐬𝐽's eyes widened as he noticed this. He reached up to touch his hand, only to realize his other hand was fuzzy. He gasped, dropping his ID in shock, while looking at his hands. Covered in short brown fur, tipped in short black claws, they were his own hands. That meant he did indeed pull Bakugo to safety, but 𝐒𝐬𝐽 was more shocked at how he had fur now. He rubbed his sleeves, feeling the soft fur underneath going all the way up his arms. If they went up that much, he touched his face, feeling more soft fur. He also felt his face was slightly longer, like he had a short snout or muzzle. He touched the sides of his head and gasped. Where did his ears go? How was he hearing things without ears? He slowly reached up his head and found what he assumed were his ears. They were longer, pointed and on top of his head, like a cat or raccoon. He tensed up as he felt his ears. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 released his ears and gave a blood-curdling scream. He didn't flail, he didn't shake, he just stood in place and screamed into the air. Kamui and 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐵 had to cover their own ears against the volume of the teen's shrieking. Thankfully, he stopped after only a few seconds. Okay, 𝐒𝐬𝐽 gasped for air. I'm good. I'm good. He made the mistake of looking down, and saw something from the corner of his eye. Glancing over, he realized he now had a tail. It wasn't that big, and was brown with a dark green tip. After seeing it, 𝐒𝐽𝐽 felt a something in the back of his mind. He gave it a mental nudge, and his tail wagged a bit. This time, he latched onto 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐵 like a face-hugging monster and screamed even louder into the open air. All Might watched the entire scene with a myriad of emotions. Shame at dropping the bottle, regret at not having the power to step in, shock at seeing that green boy rush in to help. The way he ran was so familiar. Then All Might felt even more shock at seeing the boy mutate before his eyes, stretch his arms and yank the boy to safety. How did that happen? Was the boy lying about having a quirk? No, his face and words were clear indicators. Then he saw the boy screaming after seeing himself. Undeniable proof he didn't know what happened. That could only mean that, somehow, the boy's mutation quirk did not manifest until this very moment. That left a lot of questions, but gave All Might some meager relief. He had a quirk, now. Now that boy could safely attempt to fulfill his dream. On top of that, his behavior even before that was a clear sign of a heroic heart. Such a boy could have been an excellent vessel for One for All, but he couldn't offer. The boy recently manifested a quirk, after all. He'd need to get the hang of that, and trying to gift him another quirk could hamper that. He looked forward to seeing what that boy could do. For now, though, he had an appointment with his old sidekick. At the same time this all happened, about half a block away, a wolf sat atop a building. They watched the entire scuffle, thinking whether or not to intervene, when 𝐒𝐽𝐽 rushed in. The wolf watched in fascination as the teen grew fur and animal features. As 𝐒𝐽𝐽 was screaming his shock into the air, the wolf smiled. How very interesting, she whispered to herself. 𝐒𝐽𝐽 was pacing back and forth in the doctor's waiting room. After his sudden manifestation earlier, the heroes had taken him to an official doctor for a new diagnosis. His mom had been contacted and was on her way, leaving a frantic 𝐒𝐽𝐽 alone with empty lady in the waiting room, muttering to himself 1 kilometer a second. How did this happen? It's impossible to manifest a quirk this late in life outside of forced manifestation. But I wasn't in peril myself, I was just worried for Kaken. According to all reports about force-manifested quirks, what I did definitely wouldn't qualify. If this is a natural quirk, why didn't it come in sooner? I can't think of any outside circumstances that would cause it. I mean, there are a few, but they would have caused it sooner considering how rough my school life is. I wasn't bit by a radioactive raccoon, so I dunno dash, Tanuki, empty lady spoke up. Pardon. Izuku stuttered, stunned by both the interruption and the apparent fact the heroine was able to keep up with his muttering. Your tail. The heroine pointed at said new appendage as she continued, it doesn't have stripes, so you're more Tanuki than raccoon. Also, what did you mean by a rough school life? And not important. Izuku nervously laughed. For a brief moment he was tempted to reveal everything that happened, but he suppressed that thought the instant it appeared. He couldn't reveal what had been going on. He didn't want to impede Kaken's road to heroics. He couldn't. Plus, it's not like she would have believed him anyway. Empty lady's eyes narrowed, clearly not believing his words. She opened her mouth to press further, but stopped when the door burst open. In came Kamui Woods, followed by Izuku's worried mother. Inko looked around the room quickly before her gaze landed on Izuku. Her eyes widened with shock, but she recovered quickly and pulled Izuku into a hug. I'm so glad you're all right. Inko screamed as she gave Izuku a true bear hug. The hero who brought me here showed me footage of what happened. You were so brave, Izuku. She pulled back and took a good look at him. But what happened? How did you get so fuzzy? I dunno, Mom, Izuku shrugged. I've been trying to think of how I turned into a raccoon, but nothing's coming to me. I'd say you're more like a Tanuki, Inko observed. That's what I said. Empty lady raised her hand. An instant after those words left her mouth, the unusually muscular, orange-haired quirk doctor finally stepped in. Midoriya Izuku. I'm Dr. Kuwabara. This way, please. The wolf watched the child. She knelt on the roof of a nearby building, barely poking her head above the wall. She was trying to keep hidden, and her black clothes would hide little in broad daylight, but it appeared her efforts were unnecessary, as the boy was too frantic to look out the window. She could also hear his words, trying to come up with some solution to what happened. He was mostly muttering in loops, but some of what he said was interesting. And worrisome. After some time, she saw a woman burst into the room. Green hair and eyes, just like the boy himself. Clearly his mother. She seemed to recover from her shock quickly, thankfully. In moments she gave her son a hug so tight the wolf could have sworn she heard some bones popping. As the boy was hugged, the wolf looked down and slowly folded her arms. When was the last time her own mother hugged her? The wolf dwelt on this thought for a few more moments, until she saw a doctor step into the room. As they walked into a different room, the wolf tried to keep sight of them by jumping to adjacent buildings. When she reached the other side of the building, the wolf grit her teeth. The examination must be occurring in a windowless room. She couldn't hear them anymore either. Damn it, she wanted to know what was with the boy, and if he was what she thought he was. But she couldn't just barge in. She wasn't the sort of heroine who could really get away with that. Suddenly her phone buzzed. She gave a quick look at the message, and sighed in resignation. She had a meeting with a detective and couldn't keep watching the boy. She would simply have to keep an eye out for him in the future. Getting up from her spot, she turned and leaped away from the clinic. It had been close to an hour since the Midoriyas went into the testing room. Izuku's feet had been looked over, revealing they were still mostly humanoid but had pads like a cat, or more likely a tanuki. This time around, however, the doctors administered BLD tests and several other tests using machinery that their previous quirk doctor did not use. When Inko brought this up, Kuwabara was floored and demanded to know their previous doctor's name. After she answered, the doctor gave a sigh of relief. Apparently, the doctor who had given Izuku's initial quirkless diagnosis had been arrested for malpractice years prior. After giving this piece of news, the quirk tests were finally completed. So, what's the verdict? Inko asked. Well, Kuwabara scratched his head, our tests detected something, but we're not entirely sure what all it is. Izuku pointed to his muzzle, wouldn't this qualify as a mutation quirk? Under most circumstances, yes, the doctor replied. A mutation quirk would explain your current physicality, which we've determined has sharpened senses, like any other bestial mutation, but that doesn't explain the stretchy arms, which technically fall under transformative quirks. In addition, several of our tests picked up other factors involved with your quirk. We couldn't pinpoint what, exactly, because every test we did indicated it was something else, like the machines couldn't decide what they were detecting. On top of that, your quirk factor is constantly fluctuating. Sometimes it's barely present, other times it nearly burns out whatever machine is scanning it. We figure that comes from it manifesting so late, but otherwise it's a mystery. We recommend you keep an eye on any sudden developments, and call us if anything nasty happens, alright? Will do. 𝐒𝐭𝐻 bowed her head. Thank you, doctor. With that, the two myheroias departed the clinic, receiving 𝗧𝗪𝗔 from 𝗵𝗃 back to their apartment. The entire trip, Izuku was busy thinking about everything. He had a quirk. Far as they knew, he had a quirk his entire life, and his previous doctor was just 𝗵𝗃 who deserved an atomic wedgie. Okay, where did that thought come from? Well, he could think about that later. For now, he still needed to figure out why his quirk activated now and not earlier in life. It couldn't have been anything self-defense related. He wasn't the one in danger back there. Plus, it would have activated any time in 𝐴LDRA while he was being abused by the sycophants that infested that school. Okay, maybe he needed to see a psychiatrist cause these thoughts weren't normal. While Izuku was trying to think of what happened, Bakugo Katsuki was lying in his room. After being cleared by the paramedics, the explosive blonde was released to the waiting arms of his mom. Bakugo had never seen his mom so worried. The woman held him the entire trip home, and told him to rest while she made dinner. But he couldn't rest. Not after what happened. Not after seeing that quirkless Deku turn into AF Furby and yank him out of the sludge. What the hell was that? Could he do that the entire time? Was Deku getting a laugh out of convincing everyone he was quirkless? No, that couldn't be right. Not unless his wimpy screaming came from his disguise breaking. Deku was a stupid worthless freak, but he couldn't lie to save his life. His repeated declarations of wanting to be a hero proved that. So what the hell happened? As his mom called him down for dinner, Bakugo resolved to get the truth out of the little turd. Even if he had to beat it out of him. The wolf leaped across the rooftops, her coat flapping in the wind. The sun was setting, with clouds rolling in. It didn't smell like rain, but she didn't want to risk it. Leaping and bounding fast as she could, any who saw her would only see a black and white blur. In minutes, her destination was in sight. The 𝗵𝗃 police department, due to having close ties with the city's underground heroes, had a few balconies specifically for heroes like her to land on. She wondered what regular people were told these were for, as none of them connected to any outdoor ladders or stairs. She could ask that later. For now, she was aiming for a specific balcony. She landed on the balcony with a heavy thud, startling the detective sitting just inside the window. She gave a quiet chuckle at his surprised shout, and couldn't hide her smile at how he dropped whatever file he was reading. After seeing it was her, he gave a sigh and collected himself before opening the window. Do you always have to do that? Detective Tsukachi Naomasa asked. No, the wolf replied. The detective glowered and shook his head. Whatever. Got a call from Eraserhead, saying he found that kidnapping group you were looking for. Thought you'd want a hand in bringing them down. Oh, how nice of him, the wolf nodded. Did he say where? He'll be here in a few minutes, and you two can go together. Wanna come in? Nah, I'll sit out here. It's a nice evening for now. Suit yourself, ma'am. With those words, Naomasa closed his window and went to work gathering the papers he dropped earlier. The wolf Lupin heroine sat against the wall and thought back to that boy from earlier. After she and Eraserhead took down those kidnappers, she needed to find him again. She needed to see if he was what she needed. Izuku gulped as he stood outside 𝐴LDRA's gate. He had taken a day off to recover from the stress of the sludge villain and his sudden quirk manifestation. And now he was back at the hellhole that was his middle school. Maybe they'd be nice to him, now that he has a quirk. But probably not. Izuku took a breath and stepped inside, trying to act casual as he made his way to his class. As he walked, the students he passed went silent. A lot of them were whispering to each other while looking at 𝗧𝗂. Unfortunately for him, his newly sharpened hearing was picking up every single thing the 𝐒𝐪𝐼𝐴 students were saying. Is that Deku? What happened to his face? Oh my god, looks like Deku forgot to shave this morning. You think that tail is fake? I dare you to pull it. He looks so soft and fuzzy. Think he'd let me pet his head? That last remark made 𝗧𝗂 jerk a bit. People wanted to pet his head. Honestly, that sounded better than being punched all the time. Hopefully they wouldn't try to put a collar on him or something. The very idea was gross. And demeaning. Yeah, definitely demeaning. On top of all that, 𝗧𝗂 still hadn't Deku. Oh. There he was. The fuzzy student turned to see Bakugo Katsuki storming down the hall, his two lackeys close behind. Said lackey's eyes were wide with shock at 𝗧𝗂's altered appearance. Bakugo himself looked as self-righteous as ever. For some reason, 𝗧𝗂 didn't feel his usual fear at the sight. There was some trepidation, of course, but it didn't seem nearly as deep as it used to. It was like Bakugo wasn't the scariest thing in his life anymore. Good morning, Kaken, 𝗧𝗂 waved. Bakugo scoffed and slapped 𝗧𝗂's hand away when he got close enough. I didn't get to tell you this when it happened, so listen up, the blonde boy yelled. I didn't need your help that day. You didn't do any good, and were nothing but the useless Deku you've always been. Big talk coming from someone who was drowning in SHT, 𝗧𝗂 calmly retorted. The entire hallway went silent. Everyone was surprised at 𝗧𝗂 talking back like that. 𝗧𝗂 was surprised at 𝗧𝗂 talking back like that. Among the various changes since getting his quirk, 𝗧𝗂 had noticed he'd slowly gotten snarkier, but to this extreme. Well, if he was gonna die, anyway. What did you say? Bakugo roared, his hands popping with minute explosions. Oh my, has your quirk affected your hearing? 𝗧𝗂 continued, giving a look of innocent concern. Need me to repeat myself? You talkin' back to me, Deku? Bakugo roared again, stepping closer to 𝗧𝗂. The fuzzy green teen responded by stepping back and covering his nose. Oh my god, did you remember to clean your mouth after that time? 𝗧𝗂 asked almost condescendingly. 'Cause your breath still smells horrible. Or is it just the bullshit of your words reeking? When the did you grow a spine, you twerp? Katsuki yelled as he raised his hand to burn 𝗧𝗂. 𝗧𝗂 simply leaned to the side to avoid his hand while looking at him. I think I grew it when I pulled you out of that villain's grasp. Or maybe I always had it, but couldn't express it before I saved your ungrateful butt. 𝗧𝗂 grabbed Bakugo's hand and pushed it away. You might want to be careful in the future. The nurse can't put concealer on me to hide scorched fur, now can she? Bakugo just stared in shock as 𝗧𝗂 turned and walked away. If Bakugo wasn't so stuck up on himself, he might have noticed 𝗧𝗂's trembling legs. The boy might be, somehow, more confident in himself, but a decade of trauma is still not something to shrug off so easily. It would be a while before 𝗧𝗂 would be completely comfy around Bakugo. And until then, well, at least he could hide his fear underneath this newfound snark. Due to his nervousness, 𝗧𝗂 didn't notice a fair few students watching him with newfound respect. Yagi Toshinori was walking down the street. He was also in his withered form, and in one heck of a funk. He looked up at the sky and gave a dejected sigh. 𝗧𝗪𝗎 turned him down. The student his former sidekick considered perfect, the boy he considered an excellent successor, turned him down. Harshly. Not only that, but the offer drove a schism between the boy and Night Eye. Even now, 2 days after the fact, Mirio's words echoed around his mind. Was that why you accepted my application? Was my entire reason for being here so you could try molding me into another All Might? I might want to be like All Might, but I don't want to be a copy of him. I want to be me. All Might sighed again. He hadn't meant it like that. Or had he? 𝗧𝗪𝗎 was strong, tall, and bore a perpetual smile. Had he unconsciously decided 𝗧𝗪 was a good successor simply because of how similar they were? That wouldn't do at all. All Might didn't want to leave behind a copy of himself, especially in today's society. He needed to find a successor who could carry the torch without becoming another All Might. The withering hero suddenly found himself thinking of that boy from a few days ago. The one who suddenly mutated when that sludge villain was rampaging. He would have made a good one, but he couldn't risk it with his new quirk. If it had just been growing fur like a raccoon, it wouldn't have been an issue. But the stretchy arms part made. All Might wonder if there was more to that boy's sudden quirk. As it would definitely take a while for that boy to figure things out, choosing him was, sadly, out of the question. All Might sighed and kept going. He needed to find his own successor, it seemed. Izuku was bored. Before the incident, his classes were usually spent trying to keep others from destroying his work, or dodging blatant abuse from his classmates. Even the teacher himself would hurl barbs his way on occasion. Overall, Izuku would find his mind distracted one way or another. Ever since the incident, the dynamic in class had somewhat changed. Bikugu and his goons were still volatile towards him, but a few of his classmates had stepped back from harassing him. Even the teacher lightened up a bit, citing, even a pathetic quirk like that is better than no quirk. Such a beacon of equality and kindness. Izuku sighed and looked out the window while everyone else worked on the assignments he finished 10 minutes prior. Izuku never knew what being bored felt like before now. He didn't browse the news like he did a few days prior, finding his eyes blurring for some reason. Writing helped a bit, but Izuku's ears perked up. That was it. He wanted to do something. Not just think, but do. He wanted to use his hands. He needed to. He looked around the classroom, seeing everyone focused on their writing, their teacher browsing his phone and otherwise ignoring the class, and he got an idea. If he had this idea even a couple days prior, he would have paled at it. But now, for some reason, it felt like it could be fun. Izuku dropped his arms to his sides and focused. One thing he had done yesterday was practice with his stretchy arms. He still didn't have perfect control, but somehow he had gotten used to them in record time. Good enough control that he could slowly, silently stretch them out. Making sure the teacher still wasn't looking, Izuku gave an innocent smile as his arms snaked across the ground, moving under several desks. He couldn't do everyone without someone getting suspicious, but he could at least get most of the worst abusers, like Bikugu. Izuku had to keep himself from chuckling at the idea of what was going to happen. A few minutes later, Izuku quickly retracted his arms. Looking around his class, it was clear no one noticed what he'd done. Izuku smiled and pulled open a book. He had no idea why he was suddenly, like this, but it felt good. This was a good feeling. Now to watch and wait for his trick to come to fruition. The bell rang, announcing the end of the school day. Izuku calmly gathered his things and stood up. Rather than run to leave before anyone else, a habit formed from escaping abusers, he stood around and watched his classmates put their things away. He did his best to keep from smiling as they got to their 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐽. 𝐻𝗫𝗄𝐻. Izuku covered his mouth, feigning shock and innocence, as almost half his class fell on the floorboards. It was especially funny seeing Bikugu just lurch forward and faceplant the ground. Everyone still on their feet looked confused, especially the teacher. He stood up, not moving to help his students but uselessly looking around. What happened? The teacher asked. Amid the pained groans from the students, one such student recovered faster than the others and looked at his feet. My shoelaces are tied together, he yelled. Mine too, the student in front of Bikugu whined. Who the F did this? Bikugu roared. I'ma kill them. Who could have? An unharmed student asked. I didn't see anyone, and no one here has a telekinetic quirk, right? There's no one in the entire school with a telekinetic quirk, Izuku replied. Nor an invisibility quirk. Then who did this? Bikugu's long-fingered crony groaned as he untied his shoes. Settle down, everyone, the teacher hollered over the class. Alright, anyone who's injured can check in with the nurse before leaving. I'll check to see if any of the cameras caught anything. Everyone else, dismissed. Izuku sighed and shook his head as he walked past Bikugu, who was growling while fixing his shoes. Sure, getting beaten bloody between classes was nothing for the teacher to stress over, but half the class eating dirt required an investigation. Now Izuku was tempted to think of some fitting prank for the teacher. But that could come later. Walking through the class, thankfully ignored by most of the other students, Izuku flipped through his current notebook. Along with practicing with his arms, Izuku had talked to Dr. Kuwabara about a fitness plan. He needed to test how much his new physiology had changed his capabilities. The doctor managed to test his strength and some reflexes, but there were some things he couldn't test in a regular lab. Such as how well Izuku could climb trees with his new claws. The wolf was resting. It was her day off after a tough fight. She was still in her uniform, but no one recognized her as the wolf. No one even recognized her as a heroine. This meant she didn't have to worry about scaring any children as she sat in a 𝗵𝗲𝗄 park, enjoying an ice cream cone. Such treats were one of the few small luxuries she could enjoy without that man getting involved. As she ate the ice cream, she contemplated how to get in contact with that boy from a few days prior. His sudden quirk manifestation made the news, so the heroine was able to learn the boy's name. Midoriya Izuku. He was a boy she needed to investigate personally, to see if he could help with her mission. Unfortunately, she couldn't use her hero authority to look into him. She'd have to find him personally to observe him further. That brought up the problem that she had no idea which school he went to. The news had conveniently left that part out, along with any other pertinent information. She took a bite of her cone before hearing a shout. A familiar shout. She turned to the noise and froze. There was no way she was seeing this. The boy in question was literally less than 20 meters away from her. He hadn't appeared to notice her, too busy trying to climb a tree. He was doing it entirely wrong, trying to dig his claws into the wood. She watched as he fell again, landing on his back after getting only a meter off the ground. Now was as good a time as any. The heroine quickly ate her cone and looked around. No one else was nearby, much to her relief. In an instant, the heroine became the wolf again and got to her feet. Izuku groaned as he hit the ground again. He just couldn't get up this tree. Maybe this meant his claws weren't good for climbing. He sat up and looked at his clawed appendages. They seemed pretty durable, maybe he could use them for clawing. They were pretty small, though. Probably couldn't do too much harm, but that was fine. Suddenly his tail fluffed up. Something scary was nearby. Izuku didn't know how he knew this. Probably another factor in his new quirk. He looked to his left and saw nothing, but froze like a mammoth in a glacier when he looked to his right. Standing a bit away, in front of a park bench, was a woman. She wore a long black trench coat over an outfit that almost looked like military gear. The vest she wore under the coat was unzipped to accommodate her ample bust, and her legs looked like they could crush a watermelon with hardly a flex. The most striking feature about this woman, however, was her lupin head and neck, covered in white fur that seemed to shine red in the light. Her pale blue eyes regarded Izuku with an emotion Izuku couldn't quite identify. To top things off, judging from the bench next to her knee, this wolf woman had to be a bit over 190 centimeters tall. Considering Izuku himself only stood at 155, he found himself quite intimidated. "Can I help you?" he asked meekly. Less than a second after he asked this, the wolf woman sped across the grass and stood right in front of him. The sudden appearance startled Izuku, who gave a squawk and fell over. He stayed on the ground, looking up at the scary wolf lady who was now looking even further down at him. After a few more moments of silence, the wolf woman crouched down and leaned close to Izuku. He shuffled back until he hit the tree and watched as she took a deep breath through her nose. "You smell different," she said. Oh God, she sounded pretty. Why did she have to sound so pretty yet be so terrifying? Izuku murmured, I use a special shampoo." "Not like that," the woman replied. "The difference is deeper. It's a special smell. You are special. She raised her hand and 𝗧𝗂𝐿 curled up in fear until she gently pet his head between his ears. "You are likely what I need. I'll see you later, young man." And suddenly she was gone. Did she teleport? Was she just that fast? Whatever the answer, 𝗧𝗂𝐿 was now more confused at what was going on with his life. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 groaned as he plopped down in the chair in his bedroom. It had been close to a week since his return to school. Much to 𝗧𝗂𝐿's dismay, things had returned to normal in those few days. The hype over his sudden mutation died down, and most of his classmates went back to deriding him for not having a flashy quirk. And once again, his teacher often added to the derisions. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 was tempted to try calling the police for the blatantly illegal discrimination, but he knew they'd just send the same two officers who ignored everything. The only real upside is that some of his classmates were acting nicer. Of course, he knew this was just because he had a quirk, and so was considered only slightly better than trash. Either that, or they wanted to pet his head or tail. He still flinched whenever someone did it unannounced, but then again, pets were better than punches. Like what 𝗵𝘃𝗲 started to deliver again. Pushing the pain in his shoulder away, 𝗧𝗂𝐿 pulled out his newer notebook and began to brainstorm. He found himself devising various pranks and tricks these days, and honestly it felt good. Don't get him wrong, he still loved watching heroes and analyzing quirks, but now he had a different hobby alongside everything. A hobby he had performed a few times over the past week. He chuckled as he remembered the prank he pulled on his homeroom teacher. It took the man hours to remove the plunger from his bald cranium. Then, there was that wolf lady. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 hadn't seen her much since that day in the park. That's not to say she hadn't been around. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 could feel his tail fluff up a bit any time she was around. The only reason he was able to make that connection was because he was able to see her for a brief second before she disappeared around a corner. Who was she? Why was she following him around? Why wouldn't she just talk to him? I needed to see things for myself. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 gave a squawk of surprise and fell from his chair. He sat back up and saw the wolf lady in question was perched in his window. He didn't remember opening that. His shock was also the only reason he wasn't laughing at how cramped the window was around her. Would you like some tea, ma'am? 𝗧𝗂𝐿 offered. No, I'm good, the wolf lady waved her hand. You need to work on your muttering. Anyway, I can tell you noticed my presence over the past week. I've been keeping an eye on you to gauge you as a person. And I must say, young man, you have not disappointed. Thank you. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 stood back up, scratching his head. I mean, I'm still not sure what you dash, there's one more thing I have to do before I give you any details, though, the wolf continued. I'll be gone for a week or so. Depending on what I learn, I may come contact you when I get back. Is this because I got fuzzy? 𝗧𝗂𝐿 asked. There was a brief pause before the wolf lady laughed. Yes, she finally nodded. Because you got fuzzy. She glanced over her shoulder real quick before looking back at 𝗧𝗂𝐿. Looks like time's up. Stay out of trouble, kid. In an instant, she was gone. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 rushed the window and looked around, trying to see where she could have gone, there. He grabbed his binoculars and looked through them. The wolf lady was on the roof across the street talking to Eraserhead, 𝗧𝗂𝐿 gasped. The wolf lady was talking to Eraserhead. True, 𝗧𝗂𝐿 had never gotten a good look at the underground hero before, but his scarf covering his face and goggles were unmistakable. Tossing the binoculars aside, he grabbed his phone, zoomed in close as he could, and took a picture. This was big news. Not only did he get a good, yet not identifying, shot of the Eraserhead, the fact that the hero was present meant the wolf lady had to be an underground heroine. One he didn't recognize. 𝗧𝗂𝐿 quickly transferred the photo to his laptop and logged into a certain forum. It was something of an anti-social media forum that was never advertised, so only a few people actually knew it existed. It was a place where hero fans like him could gush about underground heroes. Theories and stories of said heroes' acts were the usual fare on this forum, but anyone who got a photo was bound to share. And 𝗧𝗂𝐿 had a photo of Eraserhead in broad daylight. He may as well have the Holy Grail. Smiling, he uploaded the photo with a small description. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, new photo of Eraserhead. His face is concealed, hence why I can share this. In the photo is also an unknown individual, possibly a heroine. Has anyone seen this lady before? A short post, but still one that made him excited. A new heroine. He couldn't wait to see if anyone else has anything on her. Sadly, he couldn't stick around. He had homework. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 growled as he finally stepped out of the shower. He had spent almost an hour scrubbing and washing, trying to get rid of every piece of glitter. He hated glitter. At least no one laughed when he was showered with it at school. Not when it felt like half the students and teachers were also victims of these stupid tricks. Storming upstairs, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 thought back to the last week, starting with when he was attacked by that sludge 𝐒𝐻𝑅. Ever since that day, ever since Deku got hairy, things had been weird at his school. Some of those extras were being a bit nicer when they couldn't have cared less before. And all the weird SHT going on made it feel like the school was haunted. One extra actually suggested if that was the case. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 scoffed. Deku was clearly the one responsible. He was one of the only ones who hadn't been hit. Those extras were stupid to think it could be anything else. Problem was, he had no idea how he was doing it. Some of these pranks were too elaborate to pull off on quick notice, and there was no way Deku was sneaking onto campus to set them up. The blonde teen grit his teeth as he plopped onto his bed. Maybe a good old-fashioned beating would make Deku stop. The heroine stepped off the train, holding her coat close. Hokkaido was always chilly this time of year. Or perhaps every time of year. She wasn't sure, she didn't come up here very often. It was worse because she wasn't a wolf right now. She wasn't even technically the heroine right now, dressed in casual winter clothes. She had an excuse to be up here as a human, but not as the wolf. She couldn't risk any of his people noticing her. The heroine walked away from the station, and down the fairly empty street. No one paid her any attention as she left the city center towards the residential area. She was on her way to visit a very old, very incredible retired hero. She smiled as she walked up the sidewalk to the front door of a cozy-looking house, only to see the door open before she arrived. Standing in the doorway was a woman with long gray hair, who had clearly aged gracefully. "Honey's been expecting you," she smiled as the heroine nodded her thanks. She walked past the older woman, into the thankfully warm abode. The inside was like any other retired hero's home, the walls lined with newspaper clippings and accolades of past achievements. There were also various tables and pedestals adorned with puzzles of every variety, including a Rubik's Cube made from gold and covered in gemstones. The heroine walked past these and into the middle room of the house, where the hero in question was waiting. Kneeling on the floor in the wide room was 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗔, formerly the numerical hero 𝗲𝗏𝗔. A man with frazzled gray hair and dressed in a red bathrobe, solving a puzzle while few would guess this man was once the most feared hero in Hokkaido. His quirk was simple on paper, letting him follow lines of probability, but he had refined his art to the point of having prophetic powers. Few who knew him could forget how his identifying a bird outside a window, the color of the shoelaces belonging to a pizza delivery boy, and counting the pepperonis on his first slice of pizza enabled him to identify the time and place his hated rival, the villain Taurus Bingley, would attempt an assassination. He had also spent 5 years tracing several lines of probability to determine that, at its core, humanity was a good race. And wasn't that a good thing to know? "You sounded rather serious when you called me," the 𝗲𝗏𝗁𝗲 said as he put another puzzle piece into place. "Did you find something useful for your mission? Didn't you use your work to guess?" the heroine asked as she knelt in front of him, with the puzzle between them. "I don't use my quirk all the time," 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗲 shook his head. He placed another piece, completing the puzzle, and removing his blndfld. "So, what occurred?" "I found someone like me," the heroine replied. "He's young, though, and only recently awakened. Before I try bringing him in, though, I would like your opinion. Would you say he could be brought up to the task?" 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗲 rubbed his chin. "That is quite the question. Did you bring your payment? The heroine reached into her bag and held out a pack of cookies. The former hero smiled and took the cookies. He slipped the pack into a pocket in his robes, and pulled out a 20-sided die. He tossed the die against the nearest wall, letting it bounce off and roll back towards him. He glanced at it, noting which numbers were facing up, before getting to his feet. The heroine watched as he grabbed an empty vase from a nearby table and filled it with water. He then held it close to his face, counting the bubbles inside, before pouring it out into the different plants around the room. Then, without warning, he threw the vase at the heroine. If she didn't have sharpened reflexes, it might have impacted her face. As is, she deftly caught the vase without injury. The 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 smiled and walked back to his spot, calmly kneeling. He will need guidance, the former hero finally explained. However, with such proper guidance, he will be perfect in every way. But be careful. He has his own path to walk, and it would do great harm to completely tear him from it. That was it. That was all the heroine needed. She smiled and graciously bowed her head. Bango bowed back, and the two rose to their feet. Bango's wife came in, offering to let the heroine stay for dinner, but she had to decline. She needed to get back soon as she could, to prevent raising any suspicion from that man. With a sigh, the heroic couple bade farewell and the heroine departed the house. As the door closed, Bango's wife turned to him. "You didn't tell her the full result, did you?" she giggled. Bango gave a hearty laugh. "I told her what she needed to hear," her husband replied. "Plus, I didn't look too far. After all, even I like being surprised from time to time." The following morning, Izuku was up and active despite it being a day off. Much as he had the entire past week, Izuku felt more rested this morning than he had for literally years prior. Izuku was loving this. He hopped onto his laptop to look up the latest hero news when he saw a ping from his email. Clicking it, he saw he received a private message from the Underground Hero Forum. That private message was from an older member whom Izuku respected. He had gotten messages from them in the past, and each one had been significant to Izuku. This one was no different. To 𝗧𝗵𝗲 from _Rodentia_Deus, an impressive photograph, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Your photo is probably the best photo of Eraserhead to be found in a long time. Of more interest is the wolf lady next to him. She's definitely an underground heroine, though I can barely find anything on her. She seems to be even more secretive than Eraserhead, despite her Lupin features. However, I know who she is because I myself managed to record a short video of her approximately 3 years ago, which was presumably the start of her career. I have shared it with you, and I trust you won't share with anyone else. I think you'll enjoy it. Izuku squealed with joy. A video of the wolf lady. He quickly clicked the attachment and was glued to the screen as the video loaded. It was a grainy video, clearly from a cell phone camera. It started with the camera going over a damaged window frame and a distorted voice talking about termites before a howl was heard outside, alongside a flash of light. The camera quickly looked out the window to the alley below. One end of the alleyway was burning, with some trash bags on fire. Next to these bags was an unconscious man in black clothes with a knife. Izuku briefly wondered if those clothes were black before things ignited. The camera panned to the other side of the alley, and there was the wolf woman standing in front of a scared prone woman. Looked like the wolf intercepted a mugging. With a huff, the wolf turned to the woman and gently knelt. "Are you all right?" the wolf asked. I am fine," the woman nodded. "Why, you saved me." "Thank you. I'm a heroine, it's what I do." "A heroine? Oh, thank God. I don't recognize you, though. What's your name?" After that, the wolf gave her name and the video suddenly cut. Izuku leaned back, processing her name. Somehow, it seemed to fit her. He smiled as he repeated the name to himself, barely louder than a whisper. Amaterasu, Dr. Kuwabara felt that he was an intelligent man. He scored in the top 3% of his class in med school. His quirk, which he dubbed Spirit Sense for kicks and giggles, let him get a feel for quirks. Nothing incredibly specific, but enough that he could guess the basic function and type of a quirk just by looking at someone. He was a highly regarded quirk doctor due to these two facts. Yet the case of myheroacademia threw him for a loop the size of Tokyo Bay. The boy was an enigma. A mutation-type quirk forming a few years after the standard mark was almost non-existent. A quirk of any variety manifesting a good decade after the standard mark is unheard of. He had asked contemporaries in America, China and Europe, and none of them had ever heard of such a case, let alone one with such drastic results. On top of that, Kuwabara's quirk couldn't figure anything out. It was like the boy's quirk factor was a bowl of stew caught in a storm, only solid enough to know it's there but not enough to find out what sort of quirk it was. The doctor sighed as he hung up his phone, hitting another dead end. No one in Russia knew about anything like this either. As time passed, it really seemed like myheroacademia was the first case of his kind. That meant he would have to be careful. Kuwabara would have to slip him into weekly checkups to make sure this sudden manifestation didn't come with health complications. The burly doctor gave a small smile. Uncharted territory in quirk science. Hopefully this would be more fun than scary. And hopefully the boy would be alright, as well. You're dead, Deku. Come up with something new, you six-piece chicken 𝗧𝗵𝗲. While Dr. Kuwabara was contemplating Izuku's circumstances, said fuzzy boy was running for his life from his three main bullies. About an hour prior he had pulled off his most elaborate prank yet, and now that school was over his abusers decided to show just how much they liked it. It probably didn't help much that this past prank also involved glitter, so all three abusers were sparkling like they were characters in a shoujo anime. I can't believe a useless deca like you thought you could get away with it, one of Bakuga's lackeys screamed. Where did you even get that many goats? The other one roared. Would you believe me if I told you Mizudafu has a local rent-a-goat service? Izuku laughed as he kept running. He was glad to see he could still run just as fast in his new form as his original. In fact, it felt like he could run faster now. He also found himself wanting to lean forward more than usual. Maybe this meant he could run on all fours. That was something to test later, where being slow didn't mean a burning death. At least for now, he was fast enough that he had a few seconds space between him and his assailants. He also had a way to increase that lead. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a banana. None of the bullies seemed to care about him quickly peeling it and eating the fruit. Once finished, he turned and threw the peel with perfect accuracy so it hit the ground right under Bakuga's foot. With the exploding boy in the lead, him tripping and hitting the ground also caused the other two to trip and embrace pavement. You did not just banana peel me, you 𝐹. Rather than respond, Izuku just kept running. He rushed around a corner, hitting an empty street. Izuku thought he was home free, but sadly it was his turn to slip. A badly placed candy wrapper resulted in Izuku losing traction and taking a few wild steps before falling against the adjacent building. He clipped the small decorative tree in front of the building as he went down, causing some leaves to fall. Izuku failed to catch himself before his head hit the wall, dazing him a bit as he slid to the ground. Great, his abusers would catch up now. In his daze, the fuzzy boy's eyes fell on a nearby flock of birds poking through the garbage. His spinning mind, for a brief instant, thought about how those birds could fly away from his bullies. In that moment, he wished he was a bird. Poof! Izuku gave a squawk of surprise as his vision was obscured by some sudden smoke. No wait, it wasn't smoke. Whatever it was, it dissipated before he could figure out what it was. His mind also seemed to clear up, like he didn't just stumble head first into a brick wall. He stood up to regain his bearings and noticed everything seemed taller. What happened? He heard his abuser's footsteps, and Izuku pressed himself against the wall. There was no way they wouldn't see him. To his surprise, Bakuga and his cronies ran right by him. They didn't even give him a passing glance. Where'd you go, Deku? The long-fingered goon shouted. We'll get you, the other one yelled as he passed Izuku entirely. The fuzzy teen watched them run by in utter confusion. How did they not see him? He was literally right there. There was no way they'd miss him. Well, whatever. At least he was home free. He turned to the nearest storefront window to see if he had any weight. Izuku looked at his reflection, and he did not see himself. There was no fuzz in that window, but rather feathers. Izuku saw a crow, just like the ones down the street, looking at him from the reflection. It took him a few seconds to realize he was looking at himself. Izuku, once again, screamed at the top of his lungs and flailed around. Anyone seeing him, however, would have just seen and heard a distressed crow hopping around and flapping its wings. After a few seconds, Izuku calmed down and took another look in the reflection. He was most definitely a bird. How did this happen? Was he gonna be stuck like this forever? He didn't want to be a bird. After calming down a bit more, Izuku realized he could feel something on his head. Looking in the reflection, he could see what looked like a tiny leaf on his head. Confused, he shook his head, but it stayed in place. Even when he tilted his head at an angle that would have made it slip off, the leaf stayed in place. Even weirder, he could feel it much the same way he could feel his tail. Curious, he gave that leaf a mental nudge. Poof! There was more of that white smoke stuff, and when it cleared, Izuku was tall again. The reflection displayed his new, fuzzy exterior once more. How did that even happen? He reached up and felt the leaf on his head. He pulled it off and looked at it. Oddly, it was dried and cracking, a stark contrast to the leaves on the ground. Wait. Fuzzy body. Transformed with a leaf. Was he really a tanuki? Amaterasu, the Lupin Underground heroine, was bored. She had gotten back from Hokkaido just in time to be called into a meeting for an upcoming raid. The heroes present were just waiting for the good detective and, apparently, one more hero before the meeting began. She didn't mind helping in raids, but she didn't like it when over half the attending heroes were spotlight heroes. Her anonymity was one of her greatest possessions, and she didn't want to lose it from being associated with so many heroes who demanded the cameras. Also didn't help that many of those heroes looked at her in confusion, as though they didn't really know if she was a heroine. Sorry we're late. Detective Tsukachi exclaimed as he stepped into the room. Amaterasu turned to him and the hero stepping in with him. The instant she saw the tall, flaming hero, she jumped to her feet. What is Endeavor doing here? The wolf growled. He's gonna be helping us in this raid, Tsukachi replied. Several heroes relaxed, knowing the number 2 hero was a significant force multiplier. Amaterasu only tensed further, her hackles rising. I thought I told you I refuse to participate in any heroic action where Endeavor is involved. Orders from higher up, Naomasa dejectedly sighed. At least he didn't seem eager to break their word. Honestly, I was hoping he wouldn't be needed, but, after that, Amaterasu sighed and sat back down. Making things even better, the only available seat was next to her, so she scooted away a bit when Endeavor sat down in the chair. Can't say I've heard of you, Endeavor stated to the Lupin heroine. Wish I could say the same, Amaterasu tersely replied. Any particular reason for your consternation? Not enough hours in the day to explain it. Just understand that I don't like you, and nothing can change that. Endeavor looked offended at her words, and likely would have pressed further had the meeting not begun. Izuku was back at his apartment, safe and sound. He thought back to what happened not even an hour prior. There was no denying it. He had done something unusual. More than unusual. He needed to test it again. After finishing his homework, he opened his window. Thankfully, there was a tree not too far away. He stretched his arm out and plucked a leaf from a branch. Izuku stared at the leaf in his hand. When it happened earlier today, it was completely accidental. But if it worked the way it did in games or books, well, only one way to find out. He turned to the full-body mirror his mom had got him a couple weeks ago, looking at his fuzzy exterior. Even now it was a bit jarring to see. Moving on, he needed to focus. To think of someone. For a brief instant, he thought of Bakugo, and no, not Bakugo. He didn't want to see that guy right now. But there was someone else on his mind. Izuku took a breath, kept his thoughts on that person as he gently set the leaf on top of his head. There was a burst of smoke. No, not smoke. It didn't smell bad and wasn't warm. Some sort of vapor. Maybe. Whatever it was, it obscured his vision for half a second before it dissipated. When it did, and when Izuku could see his reflection again, he could see it wasn't him. Instead, there was the reflection of a very startled All Might looking back at him with a small leaf sitting in the V of his hair. Izuku screamed in All Might's voice. He was not honestly expecting it to work so quickly or so easily. Moments later, his mom burst into his room, frying pan in hand, to see a 7-foot blonde intruder in her son's room. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐽𝐻! 𝐒𝐭 screamed. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐽𝐻! All Might Izuku screamed back. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐽𝐻! 𝐒𝐭 screamed as she started hitting him in the shoulder with said frying pan. No, no. Wait. Mom, he screamed before plucking the leaf. There was another puff of vapor and Izuku was back to his fuzzy self. It's me. It's me. Thankfully, his mom stopped her onslaught and stared at Izuku in shock. Izuku, she gasped. What the how did 𝐻𝐸𝐻? I think we should tell the doc about this. You can shapeshift. Dr. Kuwabara Kazuma asked, his shock clear on his face. Like, legit shapeshift. Izuku nodded from his seat across from the doctor, with 𝐭 sitting next to him. Discovered it by accident yesterday, the fuzzy teen explained. It's exactly like a Tanuki's transformation from manga and stuff. I put a leaf on my head and transform into whoever I'm thinking about. After the initial intentional test last night, I spent a few hours changing into different people. All I need is a leaf. This is astounding, the quirk doctor rubbed his face. I've heard of all sorts of transformation quirks, including ones that require a secondary medium. But using a leaf is entirely new to me. Think you could demonstrate for me? Oh, sure, Izuku nodded. The teen hopped to his feet, went to the small tree that seems to be in the corner of every doctor's office and plucked a leaf. He stared at Kuwabara for a moment before setting the leaf on his head. There was the sudden burst of vapor and suddenly there were 2 Kuwabaras in the office. The doctor stared awestruck at his doppelganger, getting up and walking around the transformed Izuku. The transformed teen watched the doctor circle him, but there was something weird. Fascinating, the doc said as he stopped in front of Izuku. Am I really this ugly? Oh doc, you aren't ugly, 𝐭 giggled. Izuku laughed as well, reaching up to pluck the leaf. Wait a minute. Kuwabara suddenly grabbed Izuku's wrist. Something I gotta check. Can you lift your shirt? What? Izuku asked, morphing his face to one of confusion and shock. Doctor, isn't that inappropriate? 𝐭 asked with feigned horror. No, seriously, Kuwabara stepped back. I need to see your chest real quick. Izuku, still confused, lifted his shirt, showing off the doctor's somewhat muscular stomach. Kuwabara smiled. Interesting, he nodded. Before anyone else could say anything, Kuwabara lifted his own shirt, surprising both Midoriyas when they saw his six-pack abs and the long scar going down one side. Izuku's transformed stomach did not look like that. Okay, detransform, and then turn back into me real quick. It took a moment, but Izuku did just that, resetting his transformation and turning back into the doctor. He lifted his shirt again, and this time his transformation was accurate. Looks like the accuracy of your transformations is based on your knowledge of the target, Kuwabara explained. Would be epic if you're trying to be an infiltration-style hero, if you're careful. Question, Izukabara raised his hand. What's with that haze around you? What haze? I can see this weird haze around you, kinda like the pattern of a holofoil trading card. Your eyes are like shining gold, too. What's all that about? The doctor just stared at Izuku in abject shock. Young man, you're using my quirk. The raid was going off without a hitch. Endeavor was seriously beginning to wonder why they even called him in. Maybe these guys were semi-scary human traffickers to mediocre heroes, but he was honestly feeling bored. Hell, his own sidekicks could have probably handled these mooks by themselves. The only object of interest here was Amaterasu. The Lupin heroine, whom he had never even heard of before, was nothing but antagonizing towards him, outright saying she was tempted to quit the raid because she wanted nothing to do with him. He was used to being hated by heroes jealous of his status, but the venom she spat with every word was still startling. He watched as Amaterasu grabbed a man by his collar and literally hurled him across the room. She had been displaying such strength the entire time, and it was fascinating. He had yet to see her use any quirk, though. Perhaps her wolf-like features were the extent. That would be unfortunate. 𝗵𝗲 was shaken from his musings when a particularly tall villain decked him in the face. The 𝗵𝘃𝗧𝗏 actually pushed him back a bit, so 𝗵𝗲 retaliated in kind. He launched a stream of flames to send the villain flying back before turning back to follow Amaterasu further in. The wolf was like a pale blur, zooming through each room with almost surgical precision. Then 𝗵𝗲 beheld a sight that almost floored him. Amaterasu burst into a room with close to a half-dozen villains. Each one had a weapon or projectile quirk aimed at the door. Amaterasu ducked under a few spines and 𝗓𝗏. Amaterasu gave a loud howl, and 𝗵𝗲 was awestruck at the results. The hero saw heat waves flood the room, and most of the villains just fell to their knees. Amaterasu's howl could generate intense heat without creating flames. That was an incredible quirk. Why on earth was she an underground heroine? While most of the villains were incapacitated from the intense heat, one of them merely sneered. He was tall and almost looked like he was made of metal. While the heat was enough for the rest, this one just seemed to shrug it off. "I am the Man of Steel," the villain laughed. "Your heat won't work on me, unless you're willing to risk killing our hostages." The villain gestured to the side, and sure enough there was a cage full of civilians. It had been sheer luck Amaterasu's heat didn't hit them. The Lupin heroine in question just glared. "I see you're willing to use such cowardly tactics to impede us," Amaterasu growled. "Then I shall simply use a different approach." She took a deep breath and howled again. The villain sneered, ready for more heat. However, both he and 𝗵𝗲 were surprised to feel things turn cold. Amaterasu's howl persisted, and the so-called Man of Steel was horrified when frost formed on his body. His lower legs, and the downed villains, were unaffected, but the rest of his body was soon covered in frost. The sudden change from being hot to being freezing was enough to paralyze the villain. After the howling ceased, Amaterasu casually walked up and pushed the frozen villain over, nodding her approval at his defeat. "Sorry for the scare," she told the civilians as she walked to the cage. "Gimme a minute, I'll get you out of there." 𝗵𝗲 could only look at her as she practically ripped the lock off. Here was a heroine who was tall and strong. Not only that, but her quirk gave her power over heat and cold. "She's perfect," the flaming hero whispered to himself. Izuku was back in his apartment, writing in his notebook. He was making notes on the different transformations he could achieve. He had spent much of the day working with Dr. Kuwabara experimenting with different forms, and practicing with their quirks to see just how good he could mimic them. Turns out, it was a lot harder than he initially experienced with the doctor's quirk. "Using passive quirks comes fairly naturally," Izuku muttered as he wrote, "but using active quirks, such as Kamui Wood's branches, takes practice and knowledge of the quirk to pull off, like having the actual quirk. On top of that, I can't mimic transformative quirks. Using Ryukyu for an example, I can shapeshift into her, and I can shapeshift into her dragon form, but I can't turn into one and shift into the other. And then there's the time limit. Hello, kid." Izuku gave a startled shout before turning to his window. Just like a week prior, there was a very familiar wolf heroine squatting on his windowsill. At least the window had been open this time. The heroine gave a laugh at Izuku's shout. Hello, Amaterasu," Izuku greeted. The Lupin heroine's eyes narrowed. Izuku didn't get to finish his sentence as Amaterasu was suddenly in his room, her hand on his throat. "Who told you my name?" she growled. "I know I did not share it before my departure." I learned it online. Izuku cried, afraid of the angry wolf woman. There's that forum for geeking out about underground heroes, and someone there sent me an early video of you where you said your name. There was a pause, and Izuku almost teared up before Amaterasu let go. I apologize, she looked aside. I try not to let my name out, so hearing you say it, I'm sorry. It's alright, Izuku scratched the back of his neck. No, Amaterasu cut him off. I came here to check on things. I should not have scared you like that. I'll make it up to you later, somehow. Her gaze fell on his notebook. She read a few lines. You can transform. Why yeah, I first learned yesterday. Did a lot of trying things out today with my quirk doctor. Quirk doctor. Who are they? Kuwabara-Kazuma. Big guy with orange hair. He will need to be spoken to later. She gently ruffled Izuku's hair, helping him recover more from the scare earlier. But yes, I am the underground heroine Amaterasu. And you, young man, are exactly what I need for something. I won't share the details just yet, but I will be needing your help at a future time. And my help? Izuku asked, only for Amaterasu to continue without acknowledging his question. In the meantime, you're gonna try out for UA, right? Good. I'll drop by sometime after you get off school. We'll need to discuss your upcoming workout routine. You're too skinny to do much good right now. See you later. And again, she was gone before Izuku could say anything else. He sighed and sat back in his chair. He had so many questions for her. Hopefully he could ask a few of them next time they met. Closing his notebook, he checked the news on his phone. A particular article caught his interest. An article about an upcoming museum exhibit. Dr. Kuwabara was alone in his office. He had written and rewritten his notes on Midoriya's capabilities multiple times. It still read like something out of the realm of possibility, but hopefully the attached videos would prove his truth. This was a big thing, after all. He needed it to be perfect before publishing the results. Hoping his latest paper was satisfactory, he moved to Dr. Kuwabara froze. He knew that voice. He had conversed with the woman that voice belonged to multiple times in the past. Each time had been beyond stressful. He looked up from his computer to face the woman sitting in the chair in front of him. The woman was a bit on the short side, with lavender hair and gold eyes. Her vulpine ears were each adorned with a pair of intricately carved earrings. Her black outfit was crisp and formal, her hands covered with fine black gloves. Her smile was soft and sweet, yet filled Kuwabara with dread. This woman was Kanazuki Shizuka, the current chairwoman of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Hello, chairwoman. Kuwabara slowly leaned back in his chair, trying to give the impression of being relaxed. May I ask what brings you here tonight? An underground heroine informed me you've been dealing with quite the fascinating quirk recently. Shizuka kept smiling. Mind giving me the details? Kuwabara, still pretty scared, slowly spun his computer monitor around for the chairwoman to read the screen. She took the keyboard, scrolling down while reading the paper. At the end, she gave a wide smile. That is quite interesting, Shizuka nodded. You were going to publish this in one of the Quirk Sciences journals, correct? Yes, Kuwabara nodded. This is an incredible new quirk and don't publish it. The doctor jerked to the chairwoman in surprise. Her smile was gone, replaced with a serious, yet not unhappy, glare. He opened his mouth to speak, but the chairwoman interrupted him. Do not publish your results. That boy's abilities are special, yes, but must be kept secret. You may have hidden the boy's identity, but there are a lot of villains out there who could easily figure out who he is. Especially with that news clip of him saving that boy close to a month ago. You publish that paper, he could be in danger. But what if more people like Midoriya appear? Kuwabara asked. People who could use the results of this paper to aid in their own quirk diagnosis. More people have appeared, Shizuka calmly replied. Kuwabara was in shock as she continued, Midoriya Izuku is not the first to manifest such abilities, merely the latest, and one of 2 in Japanese borders. If you wish, I can put you in contact with the other doctors who have encountered such powers, but you must not post anything publicly. Understood. The doctor, still in shock, could only nod. Good. Now, keep helping the boy. I'll send some people on occasion to go over any results, okay? You're not in trouble. See you later, good doctor. And then she was gone. In less time than it took to blink, the chairwoman had vanished from Kuwabara's office. He looked around, noting the door hadn't even been opened. He may not have known it, but that night, Kuwabara was just as confused as Midoriya Izuku. Okay, 𝐭𝐽 smiled, we'll meet back up for lunch, right? You got it, Mom. Izuku gave 𝐭𝐽 a quick hug before rushing into the museum. He had come on a mission. With how his first transformation and some of his practice experiments went, he knew he could transform into animals just as easily as people. So here he was, taking notes on the next subject of transformation tests. Dinosaurs. Ancient mammals. Prehistoric life, big and small. Izuku walked around the museum, taking in the sights of the new paleontology exhibits. He was rapidly taking notes on all the displays, having an idea he wanted to try out. The skeletons were cool, but he gave more attention to the models and dioramas of how the creatures looked when alive. Room by room, Izuku filled his book with sketches and notes on how the animals moved and acted. Izuku's mutter storms, for once, were not on quirks but about the animals. Maybe I could try a few of these after I get home, Izuku muttered to himself. Sounds like you're having fun, a museum worker laughed as he walked up. Usually it's the younger kids so energetic about these things. Oh, Izuku looked up, part of it's 'cause of my quirk. I can shapeshift into things, so I'm studying up on animals like these to see if I could turn into them. The museum worker's eyes widened. You can shapeshift into dinosaurs? I don't know, Izuku shrugged, I haven't tried yet. Would you like to see the model for one of our newer exhibits? Sure. With that affirmation, the museum worker took Izuku's hand and dragged the fuzzy teen to the back of the museum. A lot of people gave them weird looks, but didn't think anything bad happened since neither Izuku nor the worker seemed at all stressed or angry. After a minute, Izuku was dragged to one of the back rooms, where a few other workers were busy debating how to arrange a display. However, their debate came to a halt when Izuku and the other worker entered the room. Kishinami, you know museum visitors aren't allowed back here, one of them stated. Trust me on this, the man, Kishinami, declared. He turned to Izuku and gestured to a small model of a quadruped dinosaur. We're gonna be making a bigger version of this maquette pretty soon. My quirk can help with that, but it's a lot easier if I have something about the same in appearance to copy-paste, in a manner of speaking. Think you could shapeshift into a bigger version of this guy? Shapeshift, the third worker asked. Izuku leaned close to the model and looked over the finer details of the armored dinosaur. How big is this guy supposed to be? The Tanuki teen asked. Kishinami gave his response, along with answering other questions Izuku had concerning dimensions, mass, etc. After a few minutes, Izuku pulled a leaf from his pocket. Step back, this could be awkward. The museum workers did so, curious about the leaf, and watched as Izuku set the leaf on his head. One puff of vapor later, and all 3 men were floored at the sight of a full-sized, living and breathing ankylosaurus in the room. Wow, Kishinami stated. Can you mimic any dinosaur? The second worker asked. I think it's possible, Izuku said after transforming back to normal. Before I agree to anything else, how do you feel about pranking some people? 𝐭𝐽 was having a nice calm break, drinking a latte in the museum cafe, blissfully ignorant of anything outside her drink. As such, she hardly reacted when she heard a loud roar, followed by the screams of several people. I thought I told you to lock the cage after feeding it. Kishinami yelled as he and the other 2 workers ran past the cafe. I said I was sorry, the third worker screamed back. Mere moments after they passed the cafe, museum visitors were treated to the sight of a Utahraptor running down the hall, chasing the 3 workers. Yeah, latte bliss, The night after Izuku's trip to the museum, Amaterasu was perched on a roof. She technically had this night off, but didn't want to hang around her home tonight. She had been restless lately, and felt like some parkour would help with that. She found herself thinking about Izuku, and about what sort of training regimen he'd need to undergo. She'd have to question him about the limitations of his shape-shifting later, but she already knew he was a skinny tanuki. He'd need to work on his own physicality, get stronger without transforming. Maybe she could bring him to one of the gyms she frequents, though getting the timing right could be tough considering her home life. Home, she genuinely wished she could call it that. Fire Amaterasu's ears perked up. She sniffed the air, and could smell brimstone and greed. She only knew one man who smelled so foul. The same man who had been trying to hunt her down since the raid. She was about to jump away again, but decided against it. If he was just gonna keep following her, the wolf may as well just end it. She clicked the pen in her BRST pocket as she heard the man's heavy footsteps on the roof behind her. "What do you want, Endeavor?" she growled. "You are a strong heroine to reach," the flame hero stated as he approached her. As he was flamed up, his beard illuminated the roof behind Amaterasu. "I've been trying to contact you for close to a week. And you never realized I didn't want to be contacted by someone like you." "Oh, calm down," Endeavor huffed. "I'm here on business. I have an offer you will find appealing." Amaterasu heard the shuffling of some papers before they filled her vision. Growling, she yanked the papers out of the hero's hands and read them. "This is a marriage form," she grimaced. "Marriage to your son." "I am aware 𝗧𝗪 is underage," Endeavor calmly explained, "but as you can see those forms won't go into effect until he graduates UA. There will be many perks to joining my family, such as dash." His words were cut short when he saw Amaterasu rip the form in half and toss the pieces off the edge of the building. "Endeavor, I hate your guts," Amaterasu stated. "There is no way I will ever marry your son." "That would be a grave mistake," the flame hero growled. "I recommend you accept my offer. A quirk like yours would be wasted with anyone else." "A quirk like, you wanted to arrange a quirk marriage?" Amaterasu gripped the edge of the building strong enough to crack the stone. "Quirk marriages are illegal, immoral and reprehensible." "Don't be so stubborn," Endeavor scoffed. "I married my own wife in a quirk marriage, and the commission threw me a party for it. Don't think yours would be any less acceptable. Just agree to marry my son, and bear his children. You will have access to my family's wealth and prestige, and your children will be more powerful than All Might." "PSS off, Endeavor," the Lupin heroine roared. "I will never accept such an offer." Forget cracking, the stone in Amaterasu's grip was ground into dust. Endeavor saw this, and decided it would be best to step back. "You'll realize the worth of my offer," the hero gave as a parting barb, "even if I have to make you see it." He stormed away, slamming the roof door behind him. It took Amaterasu a few minutes to calm down. The idea of marrying the idea was beyond revolting. When her growling had subsided, she finally reached back up and clicked her pen again. She gave a sour smirk as the special recording pen played back part of Endeavor's speech. "Another shovelful of dirt for your grave, Todoroki Enji." Bikugu was, as usual, off. Izuku had pulled off another prank on him, thankfully devoid of glitter this time, and the explosive teen had enough. The instant school was out, Bikugu and the two extras who stalked him chased the Tanuki boy. They were not gonna let him go this time. "Get back here, you fuzzy Deku F. Embrace my butt." Izuku shouted back as he kept running. Bikugu roared and sped up. He had no idea how the skinny 𝗧𝗪 was able to keep ahead of him. Maybe he should do something about that after he caught Deku. Bikugu thought of possible avenues of punishment as Izuku disappeared around a corner. CRP, if he got too far ahead, he'd just disappear again. Bikugu grit his teeth and rushed around the corner as fast as he could, only to impact a solid wall. "Easy there, young man." Bikugu froze. He knew that voice. He'd heard that voice, listened to it, his entire life. He could hear the two extras behind him gasp in surprise. Bekuwhatif slowly looked up, eyes widening when he saw the unmistakable smile of. "Are you alright?" All Might asked. "I am aware I am a bit strong to run into." All Might, the explosive teen gasped. What the F are you doing here?" Taking a day off," the tall hero joked. "Even I need to rest from time to time." "So, what has you boys running with such haste?" Have you seen a fuzzy guy?" We were dash, oh yes, I saw that young man." All Might kept smiling. "He gave me a quick, hi, sorry, running from bullies." "I don't suppose you're the, bullies he was running from?" The three boys were suddenly very hesitant to speak. There were a few moments of silence before the pro hero gestured to a nearby pair of benches. "Come, sit with me." None of the boys said anything as they moved to sit on one of the benches, with All Might sitting across from them. "Tell me, young men," All Might asked, "why do you bully that young man?" One the extras started, most recently it's because of the stupid pranks he keeps pulling in the school." "Most recently? What about in the past?" "We weren't bullying him," Bekuwhatif piped up. "He's a quirkless Deku, so we were showing him his place." Showing him his place, All Might whispered to himself before looking at Bekuwhatif. "Young man, tell me, what do you think a hero does?" "Duh, heroes beat the villains." "And what else?" "What do you mean, what else?" Bekuwhatif asked. "That's all. Heroes beat villains, nothing else." He had been told that his entire life, by pretty much everyone he'd met. Why was All Might acting like that wasn't the truth? "Incorrect," All Might shook his head. "If that were it, then 𝗏 would be number one, not me." "The F you mean?" the blonde teen growled. "What I mean is, if fighting villains was all a hero needed to do, I would not be the best hero. A true hero's purpose is saving people." "That sounds stupid," Bekuwhatif shook his head. "If someone needs rescuing, that means they're too weak to help themselves." "Listen," All Might raised his finger. "If you look at all the polls, official and otherwise, what do you think my most popular act of heroism is?" "Your fight against Angry Base," one of the extras asked. "No way, his fight against Scarlet Hierophant," the other one cheered. "That fight was gnarly." "Wrong on both accounts," All Might shook his head. "My most popular act of heroism was when I talked down the villains who held the Central Mall hostage. I didn't throw a single punch, but saved hundreds of civilians, and the villains." "Why didn't you just punch the villains?" "Because sometimes heroes have to save the villains, themselves. A lot of villains are just people desperate for help, who have been ignored and pushed aside due to their quirks. If given the opportunity, they'd happily turn away from villainy and live a good life. In fact, a lot of the employees of my agency, at least among the non-heroic staff, are reformed villains. Heroes must always be uplifting and supportive, willing to help anyone and everyone they can. Going around, bullying people and showing them their place is the furthest thing from being a hero." "That's not what we were told," Bekuwhatif growled. "That's not what I was told at all." "Then you were told wrong, young man, and who do you think knows more about what it means to be a hero?" There was some silence as the words sank into Bekuwhatif's mind. All Might was right. He was more of a hero than everyone he'd ever met, and he was saying the exact opposite of what Bekuwhatif had been told his entire life. If he was saying that. Suddenly All Might's watch started beeping, and the hero got to his feet. "Sadly, I have a prior appointment I must get to. Think about what I've said, alright. There's more to being a hero than throwing fists. Now, watch me leave dramatically." The hero gave his signature laugh as he leaped away, disappearing over the rooftops. The three teens stayed sitting, each thinking about what they were told. Bekuwhatif's fists were clenched. As much as he hated it, he guessed there was some stuff he'd have to look into. Meanwhile, a few buildings away, All Might hunched behind a cooler and removed a leaf from his hair. There was a puff of vapor and Izuku slid to the floor, breathing heavily. All Might's transformations always took the most out of him. He assumed it was because All Might had such a powerful quirk. Other hero transformations didn't leave him nearly so wiped. Practicing with it slowly increased how long he could hold the transformation, but it was slow going. After a few minutes, 𝗧𝗂𝐽 got back to his feet. He couldn't risk transforming again, so he took the fire escape off the roof. He hoped Amaterasu wouldn't be mad over him being late to their meeting. "I'm not mad, so please stop walking with your head down," Amaterasu repeated as she and 𝗧𝗂𝐽 walked down the street a half hour after 𝗧𝗂𝐽's latest run-in with 𝗵𝘃𝗲. "I'm still sorry," 𝗧𝗂𝐽 whimpered. "Stop." The heroine gently lifted 𝗧𝗂𝐽's chin. "No one's perfect. Just forget about it, alright? Moving on, I've figured out a good way to help bulk you up." The two walked down the road towards the beach. After a few more minutes, they arrived at, well, it was supposed to be a beach, but 𝗧𝗂𝐽 couldn't see the sand because of all the garbage that covered it. "Wow," 𝗧𝗂𝐽 voiced. "This place apparently used to be a appealing beach," Amaterasu explained as she handed 𝗧𝗂𝐽 some gloves. "Over the course of a few decades, however, it turned into the junk heap you see now. To help you bulk up, and to perform some community service, you'll be helping to clean this place a few hours a day, okay? An arrangement has been made with an official junkyard to haul the garbage away if you get it moved to a specific spot. You'll be starting small today, just working an hour, but tomorrow I expect no less than 3, got it?" 𝗧𝗂𝐽 nodded and took the gloves. As he looked over the mess, he heard a groan and the sound of something dragging. "Is there someone else out there?" 𝗧𝗂𝐽 asked. "Did you really think I'd make you do this alone?" Amaterasu laughed. "Another hero hopeful is working on it, too. Go on, go say hello and get started. I'll be up here." 𝗧𝗂𝐽 nodded and walked down the steps. There was a narrow path between the garbage piles leading further into the beach. 𝗧𝗂𝐽 slowly weaved his way down this path, looking for the source of the grunting. It took a few minutes, but he soon found the person. It was indeed another teen, with scraggly brown hair. He was significantly taller than 𝗧𝗂𝐽, and was dragging a washing machine towards a bare spot. 𝗧𝗂𝐽 rushed over and started assisting. "You the new guy?" the teen asked. 𝗧𝗂𝐽 nodded, and he continued, "Awesome. Name's 𝗂𝐵𝐴 Senator, you trying out for UA hero course or bust?" 𝗧𝗂𝐽 laughed. "You got a hero trainer, too?" "Why yeah," 𝗂𝐵𝐴 replied. "I hope you don't mind if I don't say who they are, though." "Not a problem." 𝗧𝗂𝐽 cheered as he and 𝗂𝐵𝐴 finished dragging the washing machine to the designated spot. "I mean, mine's an underground hero, so I can't really talk too much about them." "Gotcha. Hey, wanna get a pretzel after we're done here? You seem like a nice guy. Only if you tell me about your quirk. I love analyzing quirks." With a shared laugh, the two teens realized this was the start of a fun friendship. 𝗧𝗂𝐽 was having fun. He had finished his strength training for the day, and was working on his agility. He was doing so by jumping from tree to tree in one of 𝗬𝗎𝗍's more wooded parks. This also let him practice stretching his arms, getting more accurate and stretching faster. He laughed, feeling like a monkey. It had been 2 weeks since he started working on the beach with 𝗂𝐵𝐴. He had been training every day after school, and slowly becoming friends with 𝗂𝐵𝐴. 𝗧𝗂𝐽 had been hesitant at first, with all the memories of his schoolmates at 𝐴LDRA weighing him down. However, the fellow UA aspirant proved himself to be an actually good person. Over the 2 weeks, 𝗧𝗂𝐽 learned he was a calm and casual guy who got serious when the situation called for it. If he and 𝗧𝗂𝐽 formed a comedy duo, 𝗂𝐵𝐴 would be the serious one. His quirk was incredible, allowing him to spin his body parts like a drill. The only problem was his limbs were still as soft as regular human limbs, so he'd need support gear for protection. He also, randomly, had a love of pretzels. Soft, crunchy, curled, straight, he preferred any variety of pretzel over most varieties of snack foods. 𝗧𝗂𝐽 would have thought this weird had he not turned into a tanuki a bit more than a month prior. Wow, what a month! Suddenly, 𝗧𝗂𝐽 missed a jump and was just a few centimeters short of grabbing the branch he aimed for. The tanuki teen barely managed to think OCRP before he face-planted the ground. By sheer happenstance, this was the same tree Amaterasu had been sitting under while supervising his training. She watched Izuku fall the 6 meters to the ground, his limbs splayed out like a starfish. "Did you miss a jump?" she asked after a moment. "No," Izuku embarrassedly snarked, "the ground looked lonely, so I decided to give it a hug." To emphasize his words, he gave the ground a few pats. There was a solid 3 seconds of silence before Amaterasu broke out in laughter. Long, loud, genuine laughter. Izuku chose to remain on the ground for another few seconds before sitting up. He was glad his fur seemed to cover his blush a bit. "Okay," Amaterasu sniffed as she wiped her eyes, "I needed that. Got any more jokes?" "Maybe after I finish training," Izuku shrugged as he climbed back up the tree. Wait, the Lupin heroine caught his leg. "How's your shape-shifting going?" "Oh that," Izuku replied as he hopped back down and sat next to her. "It's going alright for the most part. I can be a dinosaur for close to an hour, though human transformations are a lot shorter. I think it's tied to their quirks." "Oh. Elaborate." "Well, you know how I can mimic people's quirks." "Well, I know I need to study said quirks and practice to use them better. I think the strength of the quirk determines how long I can hold the shift. I mean, I can hold Kamui Wood's form for around 30 minutes, but someone stronger, like Gang Orca, can't be held for that long. And if I use their quirks, the limit decreases even faster." "I see. And what about All Might? Can you mimic him?" "For a bit. At the moment, I can hold his shape for around 7 minutes, half that if I use his quirk. Be sure to practice with him a lot, okay? You never know when you'll need to WHP out of God mode in a fight." Yeah. Though it's pretty strong to practice his quirk without risking a sighting. Maybe you can make a weekend trip out of town sometime." "Alright, off you go." With a nod, Izuku rushed back up the tree. Truthfully, there was more to it than he told her. Some odd aspect of his All Might transformation that didn't make sense. Unfortunately, it concerned the injury he'd shown to Izuku on that roof before the slime villain attacked Bikugu, so he wasn't sure he could tell her. Maybe in the future, when he knew she could really be trusted. The Bikuga household had always been an energetic one. Sure, Mitsuki and Katsuki swore at each other like sailors on rival ships, but that was just how they expressed themselves. There wasn't any actual venom in their words to each other. Papa Masaru had made sure of that years ago. Say what you will about the quiet man, but no one could deny he was deadly with a spray bottle. Recently, however, that energy had been dulled. For the past couple weeks, Katsuki had been eerily quiet. Even Mitsuki's shouting barely got more than a grunt from him. The few times they'd gotten him to speak about what happened to cause this, the explosive teen had only said the same thing. "I need to see some stuff." After the first time he said this, he started spending a lot of free time on his laptop, like he was right now. Mitsuki was working on dinner, occasionally glancing at her son at the table. His eyes were glued to his laptop screen, his eyes straining from what he was reading. In the past, his expression when browsing had been frustrated, like he couldn't find what he was looking for. Most recently, however, it was like he was horrified at what he was reading. What was he looking up that brought such a reaction, and why did he keep looking at it? Suddenly Bikugu slammed his laptop shut. It was a tough one, so she knew it didn't break, but the sudden slam still made her jump a bit. Bikugu was still looking forward, like he was looking at the screen. He was taking deep breaths, his arms shaking. "Sweetie?" Mitsuki quietly asked. "Mom," Mitsuki literally dropped the utensil in her hands. It had been years since Katsuki had called her that. Even when he was 10 and broke his leg after falling off a cheap jungle gym, he hadn't called her anything but Hag. Before she recovered enough to reply, Katsuki looked at her. His eyes were moist, on the verge of shedding tears. "Mom, I think I F up." And a blueberry biscuit, Yagi Toshinori finished his order at the small coffee shop he frequented. The waitress nodded and walked off to hand his order to the kitchens. All Might gave a content sigh as he leaned back in his chair. He was taking today off, and it was a day off he sorely needed. His apprentice was working with a new friend, whom he had yet to meet. The day had been nice and calm. He needed to meet Nezu in a couple hours, but until then, he was free. Toshinori. All Might gave a shout of surprise as his attention shot to the woman now sitting across from him. To his shock, it was the vulpine Kanazuki Shizuka. Toshinori hadn't even seen the woman walk up. It was like she just appeared in the chair, which he guessed was possible, considering everything else he'd seen the chairwoman do during his time. KK Kanazuki, the hero shouted. What do I dash, calm down, the smaller woman waved her hand. I muted the booth, and made it so no one can see me. If you act casual, no one will notice anything. On top of that, our chat won't take any longer than it'll take for your order to arrive. Yagi, confusion plain on his face, turned to the other patrons. Sure enough, no one else seemed to notice anything unusual. Yagi knew his emaciated form was unrecognizable compared to his hero form, but he also knew the chairwoman was definitely recognizable. So the fact no one was looking meant she was telling the truth. Going back to my prior words, the hero said, much calmer, what do I owe the pleasure of our meeting? What, can't a woman talk to someone casually? Kanazuki giggled. When it comes to you, I doubt any meeting could be considered casual. Fair enough. Shizuka laughed, her four tails waving in mirth. But trust me, this meeting isn't anything super serious. I'd just like an update from you, is all. Update? On what? My teaching at UA. I meant an update on your successor. Toshinori froze. Successor? Was she talking about Kaibara? How could she know about him? His shock must have been visible, because Shizuka gave another laugh. Trust me, All Might, you're not as sneaky as you think. The commission knows more than you think and knows when not to say anything. However, when it comes to One for All, we do need to be kept up to date. But how did you dash? We've known since Daiguru Banju. We also know about him. You forget, it was commission doctors who kept you alive after your latest fight with him. Now, come on, how's your boy doing? He's good. With the incredible shock to his mind, this was all the hero could think of to reply. Glad to hear it, the chairwoman beamed as she pulled some random lint off one of her tails. Be sure to keep a close eye on him, alright? Wouldn't do for your successor to land on the wrong foot when it comes to their newfound power, after all. May I ask what brought this up? I mean, if you've known this entire time, well, Shizuka's golden eyes narrowed with glee, let's just say his new workout partner is an individual of interest to the commission. No, we aren't gonna take him in like we did Hawks, but we are gonna keep an eye on him, too. I think you'll like him, so long as you don't say anything stupid around him again. Anyway, Kanazuki got to her feet. I should also let you know you might get called in to work tonight. There's another small raid happening, nothing too big, but our usual underground heroine for stuff like this is away for the night. Try not to stress yourself just in case, okay? She gave a playful wink, and then disappeared in an instant. Toshinori blinked and looked around. The chairwoman was nowhere to be seen, but the waitress was coming over with his order. He gave a less content sigh as it arrived, but still thanked the waitress before taking a bite. As much good as the commission has done for him, sometimes he wished he knew more of how it worked. As he took another bite, a realization struck his mind. Did the chairwoman always have tails? One of these days, Tsukachi would get to go home on time. As is, here he was, standing outside a ruined building midnight. A handful of heroes and cops were hauling the beaten thugs to different police vans. None of them resisted, and most of them surrendered the moment they learned All Might was among the heroes. Thanks for your help tonight, the detective thanked his friend. Wish we didn't need to call you in, but tonight was the best chance to catch these guys, and I was made aware of this earlier, All Might grinned. Never feel bad for calling for help. I assume you can handle things from here. With a nod from the detective, All Might's smile grew. Good. Now if you don't mind, I'd better get home and de-stress, if you know what I mean. Until next time. The detective watched All Might leap down the street and duck around the corner. He knew the hero would deflate the instant he was around the corner and walk to the bus. Good. The man needed to take things slow. He knew All Might would work as long as he could, but that would be a much shorter span of time if he kept pushing himself. The rest of the cleanup went quick. Even with All Might gone, the remaining villains were scared into 𝗵𝗵𝗲. Tsukachi had made it known he had a lie detector quirk, as required by law, and that made some villains stop shouting their lies of innocence. In a few minutes' time, everything was over and done with. He stretched as the other cops left, and moved to his own car when he saw something. Looking up, he saw someone who shouldn't have been there. All Might. The hero quietly approached him in his withered form. When he stepped into the light, 𝗂𝗍𝐴 saw he was not smiling. He didn't look angry, but he did look serious. "Why are you still here?" the detective asked. "Is something wrong?" In response, All Might held up a small paper. "A young man wrote this," All Might explained. "Something to look into. If it's nothing, then it's nothing. But if it's something," 𝗂𝗍𝐴 looked at the paper before nodding and taking it. "I don't suppose the boy is still around." No response, which was response enough. "All right. I'll look into things, now head home," 𝗂𝗍𝐴 poked Toshinori's shoulder. The hero simply nodded and wished the detective good night before walking away. As Tsukachi got into his car, he read what was on the paper. Aldera Jr. High Court discrimination, neglect, forgery. Please don't send 𝐒𝐬𝐵 or Shinrei-Ichiro. They are complicit. It wasn't every day he got word of some school performing crimes like this. Even rarer when someone points out two specific officers as being involved. Still, he wasn't entirely sure how serious this was, but he would look into it. After the detective drove around the corner, All Might pulled a leaf out of his hair. The next morning, 𝗂𝗍𝐴 was looking at the note again, at his desk in the precinct. The penmanship was a bit scrawly, like the kid wrote it quickly. In hindsight, he should have asked All Might what the boy looked like. He'd ask next time he met the man. Suddenly his phone started ringing. Maybe that was All Might himself. Be mighty convenient. Might why? With a chuckle at his internal joke, 𝗂𝗍𝐴 picked up the phone. Mizudafu Police. "Hey," a woman's voice greeted. "Who do I gotta talk to report a school for discrimination?" "Discrimination. Thank you for your time," 𝗂𝗍𝐴 nodded to the Bakugo family. The trio nodded back and left his office. When they were gone, the detective sighed and rubbed his face. This was developing a lot faster than he thought it would. Only last night All Might had given him a note talking about how a middle school had been performing acts of discrimination, among other crimes. Now he had a student who had been benefiting from said acts come in willing to testify against the school. The information he shared was beyond unsettling. Even more unsettling was how two of his officers, Izaya and Shinra, were apparently complicit in said acts. Why were they? What did they have to gain from helping a school commit crimes like this? He'd definitely be asking them about this later. As he gathered his papers, the door opened back up. He looked up to see another unexpected sight. "Mount Lady," 𝗂𝗍𝐴 greeted the heroine. "May I ask what I have information," the heroine interrupted, "about a middle school that's been God damn it," 𝗂𝗍𝐴 groaned and he facepalmed. He had an idea of which school she was talking about. Dr. Kuwabara was reading over the latest notes on Midoriya's quirk. The notes the boy himself wrote. The muscular doctor was always stunned at the sheer detail of Izuku's notes. Seriously, he'd seen professional analyses that were less detailed. At the moment, however, he was less concerned at the details and more focused on how the boy could apparently transform into freaking dinosaurs. And he wasn't even restricted to those either. Now, Kuwabara might have been a cat person, but even the most diehard cat owner would likely freak at seeing a full-grown 𝗵𝗱𝗲 casually sitting on a bench. Shaking that embarrassing memory from his mind, he quickly went back to transcribing the notes into Izuku's official file. He kept this file as up-to-date as he could, making sure nothing was omitted. With each word and line, the data joined the few files of other people like Midoriya. It had been fascinating to read about those people. Kazuma hadn't been given access to names, of course, but their countries of residence and details of their quirks were more than enough. If there was one odd thing about those files, though, it was some of the terminology used. With how these people were described, it was almost like their abilities weren't. A knock at the door shook Kuwabara from his thoughts. Checking the clock, he remembered he did have an appointment around this time. He called out, letting the guest know they could enter. The door swung open, and Kuwabara watched as someone not human casually walked into his office and plopped themselves onto the chair in front of him. "Good afternoon," Principal Nezu greeted. "You look a bit startled. You all right?" "Your knocking just surprised me, is all," Kuwabara laughed. "These past couple months, it feels like most people choose to skip knocking and just appear in my room without warning." "Ha! I know that feeling. Anyway, I was wondering if you still had the file on one of my old students who..." His gaze fell on Kuwabara's computer monitor. "SHT, he forgot to close the page." The doctor quickly closed the page, hoping Nezu didn't see anything. "Something wrong, doctor?" "Sorry," Kuwabara apologized, "but I can't share what that was. Orders from on high." Nezu stared for a bit before shrugging. "If you say so." "Anyway, about that student, is it just me?" Kaibaru-san asked Izuku as they ate some larger pretzel sticks on the beach, "or are these a bit harder than usual?" "Different brand," the Tanuki teen shrugged as he munched away at his. "I can hardly tell, though. You also have crab-eating teeth. Don't be hating." The exchange got a small laugh out of the teens. They had just finished the first part of the day's exercising and were taking a pretzel break before tackling that car down by the water. They had cleared a good portion of the beach by this point, more than Kaibara had been instructed to by his mysterious mentor. The two boys had opted to just continue cleaning as much as they could before the next UA entrance exams. It was good exercise. Speaking of an exercise. "So," Izuku eventually broke the silence, "I think I figured it out." "Oh. Strength training, community service, close to the ocean," Izuku smirked. "Your mystery trainer is Selkie." "No," Sen flatly replied. Izuku's head drooped at the response. "Nice try, though. I'll figure them out one of these days. If you do, I'll buy you lunch for a week." Challenge accepted. Izuku shot to his feet, turning and raising his hands in closed fists. He was about to say something else, but froze. Kaibara noticed his sudden silence and turned to look at where Izuku was staring. Kaibara didn't recognize the boy, but Bakuga Katsuki was staring at Izuku from a few meters away. "Hey Kaken," Izuku finally said. "Friend of yours?" Sen asked as he got to his feet. "Not really sure anymore," Izuku admitted. Curiously, this statement got a flinch from Bakugo. "Oh CRP, was he angry?" Izuku was getting worried. He didn't have any glitter on hand, and the goats were nerd, the explosive teen greeted. And that surprised Izuku. The Tanuki could scarcely remember a time when Bakugo called him anyone but Deku. On top of that, Bakugo wasn't his usual arrogant self. Izuku had kind of noticed he'd been less noisy these past few weeks, but the blonde in front of him looked almost like a different person. He still bore a scowl, but his gaze was downward, and his fidgeting indicated he was struggling to think of something. "Yes. Nerd," Bakugo continued, I F up with you. I know that now. And I can't say sorry. Not yet." He looked up at Izuku. "But when I can say sorry, I'm gonna mean it, got it?" There was a brief silence before Izuku gave a smile. "I look forward to that day, Kaken." Bakugo nodded before turning and walking away. "I get the feeling there was a lot going on there," a very confused Sen said. "I'll tell you after we're done for the day. Come on." The two teens got back to work, neither of them noticing Amaterasu had been watching them from a roof. She recognized Bakugo, and was ready to jump in if he tried anything, but was equally surprised to see him apologizing. She knew that teen was one of Midoriya's worst bullies, so hearing him say what he did threw her for a loop. What has happened since she last saw them? Aizawa stood at the gates of Aldera Junior High, looking over the building with disdain. Not because of any damage, the building itself was in good shape. No, he was disdainful because he had been standing here fewer than 3 minutes and spotted at least 7 acts of illegal quirk use through the windows. Was this a school or a circus? Well, judging from Tsukachi and Takayama's information, possibly the latter. With a groan, he really wanted to sleep. Aizawa walked through the gates and into the school building. The halls were empty, with everyone in class. No hall monitors, though. He saw cameras, and it was clear they were working, but was anyone watching them? If so, the person must have been too lazy to call out a tired-looking hobo walking through the halls. Well, Aizawa couldn't really rag on someone for being lazy. After a couple minutes of walking, the hero finally reached the main office. When he stepped in, the secretary didn't react. She just kept typing away at her computer. She didn't even look up when Aizawa approached her desk. Curious, Aizawa leaned over a bit and saw she wasn't even doing official work. She was on social media. Cringe. What do you need? The secretary groaned, annoyed and not looking up from her computer. I'm here to talk with Principal Ozuru, Aizawa replied. Can't see the principal without an appointment, the secretary blandly replied, like she was reading from a script. To set an appointment, you need to call 24 hours in advance, and you can only set in dash. She stopped speaking when Eraserhead shoved his hero license in front of her face. She stopped typing, too. Trust me, the underground hero stated. It's important. Oh, of course, sir, the secretary said with a lot more energy than before. One moment. The woman disappeared from her seat almost instantly and rushed through the principal's door. Aizawa briefly wondered if her quirk let her fly faster than gossip. After a quick minute, the most flustered fat guy Aizawa had ever seen burst through the door. Hello. Yes. Nice to meet you, the principal, presumably Ozuru Kenderu, gasped. Would you like to talk in my office? Gladly, Aizawa answered with a very unglad tone. The principal nodded and stepped back into the office. His secretary shuffled back to her seat, looking at Aizawa with a mix of awe and confusion. Aizawa ignored her as he stepped into the principal's office. A cursory glance around showed him a wall covered with awards for excellent teaching environment, among other academic achievements. If even one of those was deserved, Eraserhead wouldn't even be here. He ignored the plaques and sat in the chair across the desk from Principal Ozuru. The fat man sat at the desk, still a bit flustered at the sudden arrival of a hero. Aizawa remained impassive, staring at the man with dull, tired eyes. The hero let the silence last a good minute or two before speaking up. I'm Eraserhead, a teacher at UA, Aizawa explained, his words causing Ozuru to perk up. It's not well known, but UA has something of an apprenticeship program. We don't do it every year, but we go around different middle schools to possibly recruit students for specialized teaching prior to the entrance exam. I see. Ozuru beamed, his previous trepidation all but gone. So I assume you'll be wanting to meet our best student, right? I can call Baku - No, Eraserhead interrupted. Just bring me the files of your 3 best and 3 worst students. We at UA will go over things ourselves. I'm sorry, but the 3 worst too? Ozuru asked, confused. Sometimes, the hero explained, the worst students have incredible heroic potential, but are failing to meet it due to some circumstance in their lives. A few years back, we had a student with an incredible electric quirk but was otherwise incredibly lethargic. After we did some digging around, we figured out he was lethargic because he needed an outside source of electricity to keep himself running. As such, we tend to look at the worst students along with the best. So if you could please bring us their files. Why yes, of course, the principal nodded. If you'll excuse me, please wait here. The fat man kind of wobbled his way out of the office. The instant the door closed, Aizawa shot to his feet. He fed the man a lot of lies right there for the sake of time. While the principal was gone, Aizawa would poke around his office. First, he hooked a device to Ozuru's computer, a special hack module designed by Nezu himself to copy every file. As that worked, he would look through any loose papers and files he kept close. With a couple heroes and the Mizudafu police getting hints of this school practicing discrimination, there had to be something. He found something. Before he could even hook up Nezu's hack module, his gaze fell on Ozuru's bookcase. What he saw on the middle shelf literally froze Aizawa in place. How had he not seen that from the doorway? Was this case really that simple, yet that bad? Was Ozuru really that stupid? Taking a quick picture of that bookcase, Aizawa slapped the hack module to the computer, letting it work its magic for literally a minute before grabbing it and rushing out of the office. He stepped out to see Ozuru still grabbing files from the cabinets next to the secretary. Eraserhead? Ozuru asked. I'm sorry, Aizawa said insincerely, but I just got a call for an all-hands emergency at the school. I'll be back in a few days for those files, so keep them on hand. Without another word, Aizawa ran out of the school and back to his car. He wasn't heading for UA. Tsukachi Naomasa sat in one of the local PD's interrogation rooms. Behind him stood Officer Sansa, and across from him sat Officers Izaya and Shinra. Naomasa had disguised this interrogation as a simple performance interview, and had been doing them among other officers all day. These two were the last ones, as he felt they'd be the most difficult. Let me start with an easy one, Tsukachi opened. You two are dash. He couldn't even finish his question before the door slammed open, impacting Sansa's face. Everyone was surprised to see Aizawa Shoyuta storm into the room. The man looked almost frantic when he reached the table. Without a word, he yanked the notepad from Tsukachi's hands and started writing in it. Eraserhead, Naomasa asked, what's going on? Ask these two this question. Aizawa shoved the notepad back in Naomasa's hand. The detective read the question, and looked back up at Aizawa in utter shock. The hero just gestured to the two officers, and Naomasa soon recovered. Clearing his throat, Naomasa looked back at Izaya and Shinra. Do either of you two have connections with the Meta Liberation Army? Both officers reached for their firearms, but were thwarted when Eraserhead's capture weapon looped around both of them. With a quick tug, both officers' heads conked together with enough force to knock them out. Answers that question, Aizawa grunted. Naomasa, we've got a dusk chalice. Eraserhead, the detective stood up. Are you inferring dash, more than inferring? Aizawa interrupted. The principal of Aldera Junior High has a copy of the freaking Meta Manifesto openly displayed on his bookshelf. Aldera Junior High is a Meta Liberation indoctrination facility, and it needs to be shut down now. It had been a few days since Aizawa stormed the interrogation room. During the days since, he and Tsukachi had interrogated ex-officers Izaya and Shinra thoroughly, and multiple times with multiple heroes. They were indeed members of the much-hated Meta Liberation Army. Their main task had been to deter any investigations into the discrimination occurring at Aldera. This disturbed the heroes. They had seen, and cleared, other indoctrination sites in the past, but this was the first time the MLA had support from law enforcement. That made them worry how many other such places had help from the law. Aizawa thought back to this as he walked back through Aldera's halls, this time a bit before noon. The trap needed to be sprung while everyone was still in the building. Although he disliked that, even if this went off perfectly fine, it was gonna be a long day. Hopefully things went well enough that it would be a slightly less long day. We were hoping you would show up, Eraserhead. The rotund principal smiled as the hero stepped into his office. I hope everything on your end went well. Well enough, Aizawa shrugged as he sat down. Excellent. Now, here are those files you wanted. The 3 best and the 3 dash, those won't be necessary. Izuku drummed his pencil on his desk, bored out of his mind. He wanted to do something again, but couldn't risk anything in the middle of class. Not since that one prank with the cauliflower. Now, he had to wait for the end of class like normal people. Bakugo sat in front of him, looking equally bored and drumming his fingers. Suddenly Izuku had an idea. Making sure the teacher was looking away, Izuku started drumming just one of his fingers. Rather than drumming it over and over, he hit his desk in a particular pattern. 5 taps in a rhythmic pattern. Tap 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 tap. After each time, he paused for a few seconds. After a few times, Byakugan stopped tapping his fingers. Tap 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 tap. Tap tap. Izuku gave a quiet chuckle at Byakugan's response. In the past, Byakugan would have probably exploded his face at the noise. Hearing him play along like that was really nice. Maybe he was really getting better. Thinking about this, Izuku looked out the window with a smile. Then he stopped smiling. "Kaken," the tanuki whispered as he tapped Byakugan's back. "Kaken." "Not now, nerd," Katsuki shrugged. "Kaken, there's heroes outside." That caught the teen's attention. Byakugan turned to look, and both teens watched the group of heroes standing outside the school gate. They saw some local heroes such as Empty Lady and Kamui Woods, but there were a lot of other heroes, such as Gang Orca and Miruko. And their numbers only kept growing, even including a few flying heroes. Izuku gasped when even Endeavor suddenly appeared in the group. "What's going on?" Izuku whispered. He didn't think his simple note would cause something like this. Did it? "Are they?" Byakugan whispered to himself. Did he know something? Suddenly both teens' eyes widened as several large black vans pulled up. The backs opened up and a lot of men came piling out. Men in black armor and helmets. Some had shields, but all of them were carrying either large batons or firearms. Special assault teams. "𝗧𝗵𝗲, Byakugan and Izuku whispered simultaneously as the horde of heroes and officers rushed at the school building. "And not necessary?" Principal Ozuru asked. Then you see, Aizawa explained as he leaned forward, "The truth is, this school was under investigation. We'd gotten multiple reports about this school committing egregious acts of discrimination and fraud. Especially towards those who are quirkless or have weak quirks." What? Ozuru's face turned red. "Who spouted such lies?" "I swear, but they're not lies," Eraserhead shook his head. Multiple people were questioned by an individual with a lie detector quirk, including the former officers Azaya and Shinra. The hero concealed a smirk behind his scarf when Ozuru turned pale. "We learned quite a few interesting things from those officers, and from one of the people who brought this case forward. Such as the fact you and your staff have been pushing meta-liberation doctrine onto the students here. Although that wasn't too strong to figure out after seeing your freaking book on the shelf there." Aizawa pointed his thumb towards the incriminating book, and the principal tensed up. He suddenly shot to his feet, likely to attack the hero, but was stopped when Aizawa activated his quirk and threw his scarf. In an instant, Principal Ozuru was on the floor, bound by the scarf. Moments later, both men could hear shouting from the halls and a multitude of running footsteps. "Sounds like the raid started," Aizawa explained. "It'd be in your best interest to cooperate from here on out. Oh, and don't think this school's the only one being hit." Half a kilometer away, at Aldera Municipal High School, the principal screamed with a mouthful of ham sandwich as a very angry Hawks crashed through his window. Byakugan might have seen the heroes and SAT coming, but he still jumped in surprise when the door to his classroom was slammed open. Several students screamed at the noise. A few students kept screaming when they saw Endeavor step into the room. "Silence!" the flaming hero roared. That got everyone quiet. "Listen well, students. This school is now under official investigation. All students are to head to the auditorium, and from there you will be informed of what will happen. Teachers," Endeavor turned to glare at the pale and stiff educator, "you will come as well, but it's up to you if you come in HNDCFFS, Meta-Liberation Scum." Several students gasped at the declaration, and their teacher outright fainted. "CRP," Endeavor growled, "now I have to carry him." He turned back to the class. "Well, you heard me. Get out of your chairs and head to the auditorium. Anyone who tries to flee will be put in cuffs. Go." Byakugan and his classmates didn't need telling twice. The entire class shot to their feet and ran for the door. Izuku tried to hang back, but was caught in the mob and squished between some classmates. Even Bikugu was squished as the group rushed out the door. They joined other classes, and their rush was slowed to a cramped march. Heroes and SAT officers watched them the entire way. Making things a bit tense, though, was how many times they passed a class and found the teacher pinned by a hero with cuffs on their wrists. A few times even had fellow students cuffed. Bikugu was in shock. From their enraged shouts, the cuffed students were the ones who apparently tried to fight the heroes. From the words of a few of them, Bikugu looked away. He couldn't help but think he could have been one of those cuffed students. A few weeks ago he might have taken current events differently. He didn't want to think about it. For the rest of his march to the auditorium, Katsuki didn't utter a word, and didn't look inside any other classrooms. After a few minutes, he joined the rest of the school in the auditorium. Everyone was standing, and the walls were lined with heroes and SATs. Most of the students looked confused, having no idea what was going on. Oddly, the nerd didn't look as surprised as everyone else. Did Midoriya know something? "All right, listen up, kiddies," Empty Lady yelled, getting every student's attention. "Anyone who hasn't figured it out yet, this school has just been raided due to villain activity. We'll be questioning everyone, and I mean everyone, individually. This will probably take several hours, and food for dinner will be provided if this lasts past evening. Okay. Everyone sit down where you are, we'll call you up by name." It took a minute for the students to fully register what they'd been told, but soon enough everyone was sitting. Midoriya was heard muttering something about cushions and protocols for a raid, but Bikuga didn't listen for too long. Especially since he was one of the first called up. Makes sense, he was the student who blew the whistle, and was one of the biggest bullies in the entire F school. The instant his name was called, he got up and followed the hero who called him to a classroom. Effective way to be questioned, 1 student per classroom. The moment the explosive teen stepped into the empty classroom, the door shut behind him. The F wasn't the hero gonna question him. He tried to open the door, but it was locked firmly. What the F was going on? He turned back to the 𝗧𝗏. Katsuki gave a shout of surprise and jumped back towards the door. Meanwhile, the person who startled him just stood there, giving a light-hearted cackle. When she finished, the weird lavender midget looked at Bikuga with slit eyes, her tails wagging slowly. "Okay, that was pretty fun," the woman smirked. Who the F, who the heck are you?" Bikuga croaked. "You're allowed to swear, kid," the woman stated as she sat at a desk. "I don't mind it, kid. As for who I am, my name's Kanazuki Shizuka. And I am the current chairwoman of the Japanese Hero Public Safety Commission. Please sit." Bikuga just stared for a few seconds. The chairwoman. She came here. Was this thing really that important? The Vulpine chairwoman cleared her throat and gestured to a chair. Bikuga snapped from his thoughts and sat down. Bikuga Katsuki, the fox lady stated. "First, thank you for stepping forward the way you did. You were one of the biggest beneficiaries of what was going on here, and you still came up and revealed what was going on. One of the few who did. Doesn't change the fact I spent years being in but," Bikuga groaned. "Sadly, true," Kanazuki stood up. "Even with your deeds these past couple weeks, you still did a lot which needs to be answered for. However, your actions have affected your punishments, make no mistake." She started walking around Bikuga as she continued. "Firstly, starting this next Sunday, you're gonna have to spend 7 days in juvenile detention. Normally it would strictly be probation, but with what you did to that Midoriya kid since the start of the year, my hands were tied in that regard. It won't affect your chances of getting into a hero school, but it will be on your record. Once you get out, you'll be doing community service at a local restaurant as a dishwasher." "That sounds more like a job than community service," Katsuki said. "This restaurant provides free meals for homeless quirkless," Kanazuki explained, "and it is kind of a job. Normally you'd be paid for working there, but as part of your probation, Any earnings you make will be going to the Midoriyas to pay them back for all the school supplies and medicine they've had to buy due to your bullying Izuku. Alright, that does make sense. Glad we're on the same page. You'll be working at that place for a length of time determined by your high school, which we'll get to in a bit. Next, you'll also be under observation from a commission-employed hero. Who they are and how they'll watch you is unimportant. What is important is that they'll inform us if you show any blatant signs of regressing. Mistakes happen, but if you intentionally commit even one act of discrimination, you're blacklisted. No therapy requirements. Do you plan on stopping your current therapy sessions? No. There you go. Now, for your high school. You plan to attend UA, right? Am I still allowed to? There was a hint of worry in 𝗵𝗃𝗲's voice. Due to the fact your record is technically spotless, you can still attempt for UA. However, there will be a stipulation for you. She used her finger and traced a line across the desk 𝗵𝗃𝗲 was sitting at. First, it's public knowledge that UA's hero practical involves combating robots. However, there is a second, hidden scoring rubric for this test. I won't say what this is, it's up to you to figure it out. You will also be required to score at least 10 points in this aspect, or you will be rejected. Just 10 points? Katsuki asked, confused. Considering most people don't even get 5, Shizuka explained, I'd say having your score 10 is more than enough. Anyway, should you make it into UA or any hero school, your probation and time at that restaurant will last until you get your provisional hero license during your second year. And while you won't be under commission observation after entering a hero school, the stipulations for behavior will remain. One wrong step and you're out. That really doesn't seem that bad, Katsuki stated. I mean, I was fully expecting that you screwed up, Kanazuki interrupted, but you're also still a kid. You got time to get better, so get better. Consider that an order from the Hero Public Safety Commission. There was a brief silence before Katsuki nodded. This was more than an order. This was a promise to the chairwoman, to Midoriya, and to himself. He would get better. He would not be what he once was. I'll be a hero to make him proud, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 whispered. Nothing. I accept the terms. I'll get better. Shizuka smiled and patted his shoulder. This is John Pinhead with 𝗵𝗲 News Network, bringing you the afternoon news. Our top story. At approximately noon today, not even 4 hours ago, a group of heroes and special assault teams performed raids on the 2 schools of the 𝐴LDRA School District. They have yet to release an official report, but we managed to get a few words from pro-hero 𝗃𝗏𝗏. According to his, slip-up, we've got an indication that the 𝐴LDRA district has connections with the maligned Meta Liberation Army. For those who don't know, the Meta Liberation Army is a quirk supremacist insurgency formerly run by a man known as 𝗃𝗏𝗏. We don't know who's in charge these days, but we do know the criminals are still active, but usually work in the shadows. They preach a might makes right mentality, believing that individuals with strong quirks are superior to those with weak quirks, and anyone with a quirk is superior to the quirkless. I'm sure you can tell such an ideal is utter baloney, but there are a fair few people who adhere to it. Heroes and law enforcement are constantly on vigil for any active cells from this so-called army, but today's raid, if it is indeed connected to the army, bears a grim indication. If the army was able to infiltrate this school and lead entire generations of our children to believing such ideals, how many other schools are they poking around in? Are they only sticking to middle and high schools, or are they even going far back as primary schools? Colleges, even? Who knows? In a city far from 𝗵𝗃𝗏, the beak-nosed leader of the Meta Liberation Army was 𝗃𝗏𝗃, son of 𝗃𝗏𝗃, probably would have pulled at his hair, if he had enough to pull. Instead, he roared with anger and stomped around his office. The 𝐴LDRA district might not have been his only means of teaching the masses the right way of the world, but its downfall heralded a time of stress. After all, if this school was under their tutelage, what of other schools? The commission would no doubt investigate other schools across the country, looking for his teachers and agents. And he knew they would certainly find it in 𝗃𝗏𝗏 School District. While the other schools under his lead were at least somewhat secretive about their involvement, 𝗏𝗏 High had literal imagery of his father emblazoned on the walls. Combined with everything else that had been occurring, they had no time to make this school look innocent. This meant that, should the commission chairwoman poke her insipid nose inside, there was no doubt the school would fall. The biggest recruitment center of the country, and it would fall if she came. Surely there had to be some way of making sure they didn't come in. As 𝗲𝗏 stressed and over how to keep his place safe, he had no idea the school's destruction was already inside the halls. Of the teachers employed at 𝗓𝗏, 𝗂𝐵𝐴 read off, all but 3 were either MLA members or sympathizers. Thankfully, the custodial staff were all cleared. 𝗬𝗏𝗁 was in 𝗏𝗏's office with Eraserhead and 𝐴LLMIGHT. He was finishing up his report on 𝗓𝗏, as 𝗏𝗏 was one of the heroes assigned to help on any MLA-related case. The mammal had been listening intently to the report. His beady eyes almost seemed to follow 𝗂𝐵𝐴's gaze as the detective read the paper. Among the students, 8 of them had attempted to fight back during the raid and were taken into custody. 2 of them were just itching for a fight, but the other 6 were more confrontational. It is believed they came from MLA families, and are under further investigation. Oh, 𝗏𝗏 sighed and rubbed his eyebrows. Always sad to hear of children brainwashed at such a young age. Hopefully we can turn them around. At least they have that chance, Eraserhead nodded before his mood turned sour. But still, to think the Meta Liberation Army had an indoctrination site under our own noses. About that, 𝗏𝗏 said, I got word from the chairwoman earlier. She's going to be conducting an in-depth investigation of other middle schools and non-hero high schools. The chances of 𝗓𝗏 being the only MLA school is unlikely, but hopefully the actual number is on the lower side. And to think we wouldn't have had any idea without the man of the hour, 𝗂𝐵𝐴 smiled at 𝐴LLMIGHT. The hero looked at the detective with a confused expression. What are you talking about? Yagi asked. You, the detective pointed. If it wasn't for your involvement with those 2 boys, we would have been clueless. You being in just the right places at the right time helped bring everything out into the open. But, 𝗏𝗏MIGHT scratched his cheek, I wasn't involved. What? It's true. I didn't have anything to do with this. I wasn't even present for the raid on 𝗓𝗏. I mean, I heard about it, but 𝗂𝐵𝐴 was stunned. He wasn't sure which part was more surprising. That 𝗏𝗏MIGHT was denying involvement, or that his quirk was reading truth. But, 𝗂𝐵𝐴 reached into his coat and pulled out the note Yagi had given him that one night. You gave me this note directly, Yagi. Just after the raid on the gangers gang. 𝗏𝗏MIGHT took the note and looked it over. I have no memory of this note. After that raid, I went home, drank a steak in a cup and went to bed. Truth, curious, 𝗏𝗏 leaned his head on his paws. I assume that means you did not have a conversation with Byakuga Katsuki concerning what really makes a hero. Who? The blonde boy who acted as a whistleblower on his school. Never met him before in my life. Truth, wait, Aizawa turned as 𝗏𝗏 started typing on his computer, if it wasn't you, then who? I saw the body cam footage. Are you saying someone disguised themselves as 𝗏𝗏MIGHT in both his bulky and skeleton sizes? Please don't call me a skeleton. Some new vigilante. 𝗬𝗏𝗁 theorized. One with a shape-shifting quirk. But if that's the case, his eyes widened as his face paled. How much power can he access? What do you mean? 𝗏𝗏MIGHT asked. After your or their conversation with Byakuga, they leaped away into the air just like you do. That means they can not only mimic your appearance, but even your quirk, at least to a degree. That made almost everyone else go stiff. Someone with access to even a fraction of 𝗏𝗏MIGHT's strength could be bad news, even if they were a well-intentioned vigilante. Wait a minute, Aizawa stated. 𝗏𝗏MIGHT attracts the media everywhere he goes. If this vigilante has been impersonating 𝗏𝗏MIGHT, why haven't we heard any news reports about random sightings? What if I'm not the only one they've been impersonating? Toshinori pointed out. What if they've been performing acts disguised as other heroes as well? Unlikely, 𝗏𝗏 finally looked away from his computer. I keep an eye on all hero activity in 𝗵𝗧𝗪, and there hasn't been any sudden upticks of activity. That infers our little vigilante only used All Might and focused on 𝐴LDRA. And knowing that, I have an idea who it might be. Who? 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐴 turned to the principal. Midoriya Izuku. Before continuing, 𝗵𝗲 hit a few buttons and a projection of his monitor appeared on the wall behind Aizawa, causing the hero to move. He is a student of 𝐴LDRA, and based on my cursory poking, is a super late bloomer in terms of quirk development. Which means he suffered under MLA tenets as a quirkless child. He looks like a tanuki, Aizawa observed. And he can act like one, too, 𝗵𝗲 continued. I actually met with his quirk doctor a few weeks ago for something entirely unrelated when my gaze fell on his computer. His file on Midoriya was open, and I managed to read a few lines before it was closed due to patient confidentiality. The lines I read made mention of how he recently learned to mimic dinosaurs. One can infer he can mimic other things as well. Can you pull up his quirk file? 𝗵𝗄𝗄 asked. You can do that, right? Well, as he is a UA aspirant, I certainly can. 𝗵𝗲 laughed as he typed away. After a minute, the screen displayed his official quirk file. Well, that's interesting. To the shock of everyone in the room, the only thing visible was the statement that Midoriya was quirkless up until a handful of months prior. Nothing else was visible, save for a single line. Access denied. Present the second treasure. Never seen a clearance level like that before, Aizawa voiced. Here, let's see if my clearance works. All Might held out his hero license. Something most people didn't know is that hero licenses also contained a chip that let them access classified files. All Might's license held a black diamond chip, one of the highest clearance authorities on the planet. 𝗵𝗲 took his card and held it in front of the system's scanner. Access denied. Present the second treasure. Again, the heroes present were stunned. All Might's license gave him multinational access higher than most government officials, yet it did nothing. Just what was with Midoriya's file that not even All Might could access it? I don't understand, Toshinori stammered. How could apparently the commission is quite interested in him, 𝗵𝗲 smirked. Enough, they'll keep information on his quirk strictly need to know. I'll take that as a strong indicator of his ability to mimic heroes, Aizawa declared. But even then, why disguise himself as All Might to call out 𝐴LDRA? Why did he lie to get the word out? Everyone lies, Aizawa, 𝗵𝗲 explained. The innocent lie because they don't want to be blamed for something they didn't do, and the guilty lie because they don't have any other choice. Remember, ex-officers Izaya and Shinra intercepted any calls to the police to report 𝐴LDRA's discrimination. As for the talk with Bikuga Katsuki, he was a bully in 𝐴LDRA. Odds are he bullied Midoriya as well. As a result, Midoriya likely felt he had to look like a hero to be listened to, assuming he really is the mimic. Should we keep an eye on him in the future? All Might asked. The commission is doing that for us, 𝗵𝗲 smirked as he turned off his monitor's projection. If he does indeed make it into UA, we can ask him in greater detail. Now, Tsukachi, is there anything else MLA related that must be brought up? If not, I recommend we end the meeting here. We all have paperwork, after all. With a denial from the detective, the three humans left the office. 𝗵𝗲 watched them leave through the cameras, following their progress down the hall. Once they were around the corner, he went to work. With the press of a button on his desk, his door was locked tighter than a nuclear vault. Next, he reached into his shirt and pulled out the necklace he had worn since the day Konosuke saved him from that lab. The necklace bore 5 little charms on it, each with great significance. He removed the charm that looked like a tiny tree branch and held it in front of the computer's scanner. Access granted in an instant, Midoriya's quirk file became open and clear. 𝗵𝗲's obsidian eyes read every line, and then reread them. No detail was left unread, and 𝗵𝗲 smirked at what he saw. Well now, that is quite interesting. About 3 months after the 𝐴LDRA raid, 𝐒𝐭 and Mitsuki were laughing with each other at a local cafe. It was one of the rare days neither of them had work, and they were spending it enjoying each other's company. It also helped that today was the day of the 𝗵𝗲𝗡 holiday parade, so the ladies were watching the floats as they talked. Man, it's been too long since we could do something like this, Mitsuki smiled. We could if you actually took more than one day off a month, 𝐭𝐸 giggled as she sipped her latte. So how's Katsuki doing? So much better. Mitsuki sighed happily. I mean, yeah, he's still a belligerent 𝗧𝗵𝗧𝗍𝒃, but he's mellowed out a bit now that he doesn't have quirk supremacists whispering into his ear. Yeah, Izuku loves the new teachers at 𝐴LDRA, 𝗵𝗀 beamed. He practically exploded when he learned what the commission decided to do with 𝐴LDRA. Mitsuki gave a snort, remembering when she got the news herself. Since there was no way that several hundred students could be moved to different schools so late into the year, the commission had decided to use 𝐴LDRA as a testing ground for teachers that would later move on to a new hero school. This meant all but 3 of 𝐴LDRA's teachers were pro-heroes. Said heroes were also looking out for any remnant of MLA influence, but overall they were focused on teaching these kids the right way of things. Where are those teachers gonna head to, anyway? Mitsuki asked. No one told me where the new hero school's gonna be. Okinawa. Isn't that where you dash? Ah. No one asks about Okinawa, 𝗵𝗀 giggled. With that, she took another sip and looked at the parade. Waiting for something? Mitsuki asked. Yup. Izuku's gonna be in the parade. Wait, what? Mitsuki almost snorted her latte. Your kid's in the parade. I thought he was hanging with that drill kid he'd been cleaning the beach with today. Nope, 𝗵𝗀 gave a smug smirk. With all the volunteer help Izuku's been giving to the museum thanks to his quirk, they invited him to join their float in the parade. Had to get some special permissions, though. Why? Mitsuki's answer came when both mothers heard a loud roar. 𝗵𝗀 smiled and Mitsuki almost jumped from her chair. Both ladies turned and saw the museum float rolling by. While the float itself was motorized like the rest, in front of it was the real spectacle. Walking in front of the float was an actual Tyrannosaurus Rex. It walked at a casual pace, occasionally turning to the crowds for dramatic effect. A few museum workers were riding its back. The theropod wore an oversized Santa hat on its head, and its torso was covered by the sort of Christmas sweater you'd see in a cheesy Christmas movie that could only be found on a single American TV channel. Is that your son? Mitsuki gawked. I'm so proud of him, 𝗵𝗀 wiped away imaginary tears as she giggled at her friend's disbelief. Unbeknownst to either mother, Amaterasu was perched on a skyscraper watching the parade. As she saw Izuku sauntering down the road, the Lupin heroine gave a happy smile. He's learning quickly, she whispered to herself. Maybe he'll be ready by the sports festival. Dagobah Beach. For decades it had been a junk heap, filled with garbage that either washed in or was dumped by residents. It had been a sore spot for the city for all those years. But now it was clear. Kaibara-san and Midoriya Izuku stood on the hill and gazed across the empty sand. It had taken almost a year, but the two teens had removed every speck of garbage from the beach. Mere minutes ago they threw away the last crushed soda can. For those past minutes they remained silent. Then, "Yeah!" Izuku cheered, startling Kaibara off his feet. We did it. Then the tanuki started some shuffling dance circling around his fallen friend. The drilling teen just laughed and got back up. Both he and Izuku had undergone some physical changes over the months they had spent on this beach. Both boys had bulked up somewhat, and gotten a few small scars on their fingers from sharp debris. While Kaibara had kept his hair short, Izuku had grown his out the back a bit, just enough to have a small ponytail. He said it held his secrets. Kaibara was not willing to try seeing if this was true or not. We sure did, Kaibara nodded, and we still got about a week before the entrance exam. Many hands make light work, Izuku pointed at Kaibara as he stopped dancing. Also, I think I've got it. Got what? Your mystery mentor. Izuku smirked. Kaibara just sighed and grinned. Go ahead, who are you thinking of this time? Your mystery mentor. Izuku suddenly swung his arm and pointed at a nearby tree. Is behind that tree, well, that was an unexpected declaration. 𝗬𝗲 turned to look at the tree in question, and his eyes widened when he saw a pair of blonde antennae quickly duck behind the trunk. Holy crp, his mentor really was over there. I heard you come walking up a few minutes ago. Izuku laughed. Come on out, say hello. There was another pause before the man behind the tree sighed. A moment later, 𝗬𝗲's skinny blonde mentor stepped out into the open. He had an embarrassed expression, clearly not expecting to be caught. Yeah, this is my mentor. Say hello to Yagi Toshinori, an associate of 𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐺. 𝗬𝗲 gestured to the man as he said this, giving Izuku a side glance. He was expecting Izuku to have some expression of curiosity, as Toshinori didn't look like a traditional hero when he was in his true shape. Maybe some shock that his mentor was someone associated with All Might. 𝗬𝗲 was not expecting Izuku to have a look of recognition. Anyway, the drilling team continued. He found me a while back and long time no see, All Might? Sen froze, his words dying in his mouth. His gaze shot between the fuzzy teen and the withered hero. He knew this was All Might. How? When? Huh? Yes, All Might nodded. I suppose it has been a while. And you were training this guy, huh? Izuku gestured to 𝗬𝗲. Hold up, how do you two know each other? 𝗬𝗲 recovered enough to ask. I will inform you of it later, young 𝗬𝗲, All Might sighed. For now, could Midoriya and I speak in private? Sen was now even more confused, but could only nod to respect his mentor's wishes. As there was no longer any garbage to hide behind, 𝗬𝗲 simply walked up the hill and sat at the nearest tree. Alright. Midoriya, I was wondering when you'd come down to talk, Izuku interrupted. I mean, I didn't know it was you, but I noticed you dropping by and staying hidden as 𝗬𝗲 and I worked. How did you know? All Might asked. Rather than say anything, Izuku just pointed at his ears. Ah, I guess that makes sense. You would not believe the stuff I've heard. You may be half right. But I digress. I do believe I owe an apology, young Midoriya. I did you a great disservice the last time we spoke. Oh, you mean back when you left me on the roof rather than taking me to a hospital to see if I needed any treatment after being attacked by a villain? Yes. That. All Might was caught off guard by Izuku's blunt behavior, having not spoken to the boy since the day of the slime villain. Along with that, my words that day were, for lack of a better term, atrocious and unforgivable. Well, I wouldn't go that far. Izuku scratched one of his ears. I mean, yeah, it hurt like hell hearing the best hero in all of Japan basically say anyone can be a hero, except for you because you're quirkless, but it's not like you were really wrong, right? I mean, look at me. Izuku stepped back, spreading his arms letting All Might see him in all his fuzzy glory. If this didn't happen to me when it did, I would have just been some flimsy kid trying to yank Bikugu out of the sludge, assuming I'd even slip past Death Arms. The teen slowly lowered his arms, and his eyes began to water. It's like even God or whatever agreed with you, showing me that quirkless really can't young man. All Might gripped both of Izuku's shoulders, getting his attention. I was wrong. I admit that. I read your notebook when you were unconscious. I saw page after page of utter brilliance in there. You might not have been able to be a combat-focused hero, but those pages showed me you had the talent to be an incredible intelligence-based hero. Think about my former sidekick, Sir Night-Eye. Or Principal Nezu of UA. Or any of the other analytical heroes. There are more than heroes who just fight, and on that day I had forgotten that fact. On top of that, the withered hero continued, I had no idea of your circumstances when you asked that question. I had no idea of the literal hell you'd gone through for most of your life. Of what your peers and teachers had done to you. Knowing that now, I can't help imagining what would have happened if my words broke you, and made you give up on more than heroics. He didn't need to say what he meant by that for Izuku to understand. Well, that didn't happen, Izuku shrugged, trying to lighten the mood. Here I am, fuzzy, alive and enjoying my life. So sure, apology accepted. Just promise me you won't say stuff like that to anyone else, huh? Rest assured, Yagi chuckled, between that and other circumstances, I have learned to watch my words better. Get in some trouble, huh? Izuku snickered. More proof that the great All Might is just as human as the rest of us, I guess. I never said I wasn't human. Dude, your agency tower literally has your face carved into all 4 compass directions, like Mount Rushmore, if Rushmore was a tube and not a mountain. Hey, that wasn't my idea. And I tried to get them removed years ago. Yeah, sure. All Might, the man who can't remove his face from a building. There was a pause, with the teen and hero just staring at each other. After a few moments, both of them just broke down laughing. Kaibara, who had tensed up when he heard raised voices, sighed and sat back down. I am glad you accept my apology, All Might smiled. Now, would it be alright if I spoke to young Kaibara in private? Sure. I gotta report to my mentor anyways. Take care. And like that, Izuku was off like a shot, speeding up the hill and away from the beach. All Might watched him leave with a smile. He was glad to have been able to fix at least one rift in his life. CRP, he forgot to ask Midoriya about his shape-shifting. Well, that could come later. Now, he had something much more important. Young Kaibara. All Might called out to his successor. It is time. 1 week later, this is as far as I can go, Amaterasu told Izuku, stopping just around the corner from UA. Izuku stood next to her, looking up at his Lupinen mentor. I may be your mentor, but as I am not employed by UA, I am not allowed on UA's premises during the entrance exams. That's alright, Izuku smiled. I'm just thankful you helped me get this far. Hey, most of that is on you, Amaterasu ruffled his hair. I might have helped you with the strength training and some reflex stuff, but the transformation work is all you. Anyway, it's public record that the exam will have you fight robots, so prep a form capable of prolonged fighting. And remember, there are no countdowns in real life, got it? You got it. Izuku gave a respectful bow. Thank you for helping me, Amaterasu. With a nod from his heroine mentor, Izuku rushed around the corner. His hair bounced as he hopped through the main gate, smiling like a maniac. He was on UA campus. He was taking the entrance exam. If he passed, he'd be on his way to be a hero. He was so excited at the idea it took him a moment to realize he tripped on a random stone, and another moment to realize he was floating in the air. Instead of shock, he gave a groan. Oh come on, another weird power. Izuku muttered to himself. Where did this one even come from? That's me. Izuku spun around in the air, coming face to upside down face with a brunette girl. The two stared at each other for a few moments before the girl flipped Izuku right side up. Then she put her fingertips together and whispered something before Izuku found himself affected by gravity again. Sorry for the surprise, the eye-level girl explained. I just figured it'd be bad luck to faceplant the ground just before the exam. Oh, Izuku chuckled as he scratched his head. Thanks for the save. Gotta ask, though, what did you mean by another weird power earlier? My quirk is weird. Izuku gave a big smile. Get into UA and I'll tell you. Jerk, the girl laughed. Name's Uraraka Ochako. Midoriya Izuku. Hero exam. Yup. Good luck. Good luck, Izuku nodded before heading inside with Uraraka. Kanazuki Shizuka sat on the top floor of the building across the street from UA. To most people, this building was a simple accounting firm. In truth, it was one of many secret observation posts for the Hero Commission. She had an agreement with Nedzu to not be present on campus during these exams, but she was allowed to observe from this building. And observe she did. The Vulpine chairwoman watched the sea of applicants moving through the school gates. A few looked interesting from up here, but not too many. She gave a smile when she spotted Midoriya move through the gates, only to absent-mindedly trip on something, then get rescued by a fellow applicant. That was pretty cute. That probably meant Amaterasu was somewhere nearby. A minute later, she saw the other student she had been watching for. Bakugo Katsuki stepped through the gate. His clothes were loose, but not sloppy like they had been back before the raid on 𝐴LDERA. His eyes were full of determination, not the past arrogance and pride. His time on probation and in therapy had done wonders for the kid. Sure, he was still an aggressive prick who spoke in permutations of swear words, but his sharper edges had softened. He'd accepted he'd have to work on more than his quirk if he wanted to be number one. The door behind her opened. Kanazuki turned and gave a warm smile to the hero who stepped inside. She waited for them to close the door before speaking. "Hey, Kigo," Shizuka greeted. "Hey, Ma," the number 3 hero, Hawks, smiled as he walked up to Kanazuki. "You saw him go in, huh?" "Yup. Think he'll figure out the hero points?" "Maybe," Hawks shrugged. "He has gotten better. Easiest assignment I've had for a while." "You're just that good," Kanazuki giggled as she held up her hand. "Now get down here, let Mama pat your head." "Ma, I'm a grown man," Hawks laughed as he leaned over. "Children are never too old for head pats," Shizuka smirked as she patted Hawks' head. She was proud of how her adoptive son grew up. A vast change from how she first found him, silent and crying after a villain attack. Now he practically towered over her and almost never stopped smiling. Though she never understood his addiction to fried chicken. Izuku stretched as he exited the main UA building with Kaibara, who joined up with him earlier. The written exam had gone by fairly quick, and was actually really challenging. Challenging, but honestly fun. Izuku only managed to finish it a few minutes before the deadline. After that exam, all the hero applicants were taken to an auditorium to be briefed on what was coming. Now they were all heading for the buses that would carry them to the exam grounds. "Did you really have to provoke that glasses kid?" Kaibara asked. He interrupted the teacher to scold him for not explaining something he was still getting to. Midoriya glowered, and then yelled at me for muttering, saying I was the distracting one. I couldn't just stand there and take it. You asked him what happened to the monkey that was supposed to be holding the stick that was up his butt. And he deserved that, Izuku nonchalantly stated. Anyway, which testing ground are you at? Number 7. You. Damn it, I'm at 2. Looks like we can't help each other. The Tanuki team gave a snarky smile. I guess we'll just have to compare scores when we get the results. Sounds good, Kaibara nodded, patting his jacket as he and his friend approached the buses. Hey, you got your victory dance, right? I got right here, yeah. Izuku replied in a sing-song voice as he held up a metal tube. Most people would think it was a cigar holder, and it probably was, but the teens were using them to hold authentic French pretzel sticks the size of cigars. Hey, keep it down, Sun stated, and put that away till the fat lady sings. Pierce the heavens, dude. Izuku laughed as he slipped it back into his pocket and fist-bumped Kaibara. With that, the two teens separated and went to the buses labeled for their individual zones. Izuku took a seat in the back of his bus, tapping his knees to the beat of his own music. He looked around, checking out his fellow applicants. He saw the brunette who helped him earlier, Uraraka, along with Mr. Stick-Up-His-Butt. If he was lucky, he could avoid that guy during the practical. Thank goodness he was feeling lucky. After around 10 minutes, the bus came to a stop and everyone clambered out. Izuku stuck to the back of the group so that no one would step on his tail. After a few minutes, all the applicants were gathered in a single large room. One of the walls looked a bit weird, though. Most of the walls of the room were stone or plaster, but this one wall was metal. It took Izuku a minute to realize it was the door to the exam grounds. A door. The size of a house. Izuku knew UA's motto was, "Go beyond, plus ultra," but that just seemed overkill. Maybe it was that huge to accommodate kids with size quirks. That was literally the only reason Izuku could think of. As he looked around the room, he spotted Uraraka Ochako kneeling and checking her shoelaces. Seeing her gave him an idea. A fun idea. A helpful idea, and Izuku sure did like being helpful. With a big grin, he began walking towards the girl. As he walked, he could hear the stomping of someone walking with a purpose in his direction. He groaned when he recognized who was behind him. "Hey," the tall glasses-wearing boy with a stick up his butt called out, "are you planning to dash, 𝗵𝗃?" The boy came to a stop when he suddenly felt the entire front of his body engulfed in fur. It only lasted for a moment, but Izuku had expanded his tail to catch the teen who honestly looked way older. The boy froze in place, too confused to process what just happened, while Izuku continued his trek to Ochako. As he got closer, she turned to him and smiled. "Hey there. You're here too, huh?" God, she had a bright smile. "Just lucky, I guess," Izuku smiled back. He turned to look at Present Mike, who seemed to be fidgeting with some console. Good, he had time. "Hey, want a head start in the exam?" "Whatcha mean?" Ochako asked. Izuku just smiled and gestured for her to follow him to the door. As the pair walked, Izuku took down his ponytail and loosened his curly hair a bit. When they reached the door, he grabbed 2 tufts of his hair and held them out. "Hold on to these," he stated. Ochako looked confused and didn't even raise her hands. "Trust me, my quirk is weird, and with what I got planned it'll be easier if you grab these instead of my shoulders." If you say so," Ochako said, not quite believing him as she grabbed his hair. With a smirk, Izuku reached into his jacket and pulled out a plastic tube. It was weird explaining this to the heroes at the application desk, but he didn't want to risk being excluded by not doing the proper paperwork for transformation leaves. He plucked a leaf from the tube and held it over his head. "What are we gonna do?" "You'll see," Izuku replied. "Keep tight and be ready. The heroine who mentored me told me real life has no countdowns. No reason to think this exam is any different. Start." Present Mike screamed as the door fell open. Izuku slapped the leaf to his head and, in a puff of vapor, gave a bellow of determination and charged into the testing grounds. 5 minutes into the exam, Bikugu was having a blast, literally and figuratively. The exam was, for the most part, super straightforward. He didn't even know how many points he'd earned in the past 5 minutes, but it was really fun going apeshit with his quirk again. For over half a year he'd been working on becoming a better person, and he'd like to think he'd succeeded, but in his quest to better himself he'd suffered a limit when it came to stress release. He'd brought this up with his therapist, and while they'd been able to schedule some time in a gym for him to use his quirk, it just wasn't enough. Being allowed to go crazy out here, it was an outlet he needed. On the other hand, though, he still had no idea what the hidden rubric was supposed to be. He needed to score 10 points on it, or else he'd fail to get into UA. He might have had other options, but UA was his goal. He had to get in. He still needed to apologize to the nerd, after all. He turned to blast another pair of robots that were coming around the corner, but stopped when he saw them melt. Like, legitimately melted. That actually startled him a bit. How did that happen? "Woo," a perky voice screamed from around the corner. 2 more points. Before Bikugu could do anything, a pink-skinned girl ran past the melted remains, not noticing Bikugu at all, and sprayed more acid at another group of robots. However, she didn't seem to notice her acid hit the wall of a nearby building as well. She turned away as the acid ate away at the bricks, causing the wall to begin to lean. Even worse, it was leaning her direction. "Watch out!" Bikugu roared as he used his quirk to propel him into the girl. He was careful to move his arms to grab her instead of just ramming her, holding her tight as his remaining momentum carried him a few more meters. Mere seconds later, the wall collapsed, crushing a few robots. The girl's black/gold eyes were wide with shock as Bikugu set her down. "Spatial awareness, girl!" Bikugu shouted. "Gotta keep AFI where you spray that stuff." "Why yeah," the girl stammered. Teach thank you. Be more careful." "Geez." With that, Bikugu rushed off to find more robots to fight. Hopefully the nerd was doing good, too. 6 minutes ago, 𝗬𝗧𝗃𝗀 thought she was prepared for everything. She had put almost everything on the line to get into UA. She studied her tail off, she worked herself sore almost every night, she did everything she could to prepare for this exam. She was determined to not fail. With everything she did to prepare for the hero entrance exam, 𝗬𝗧𝗃𝗀 felt like she had anticipated everything the exam could possibly throw at her. 𝗬𝗃𝗀 𝗬𝗧𝗃𝗀 did not anticipate riding a dinosaur into the entrance exam. When the fuzzy Midoriya Izuku offered to help her get a head start in the exam, she figured she'd accept the help. Sure, grabbing his hair was weird, but she thought maybe he could extend it and throw her ahead of everyone. Instead, he slapped a leaf to his head, transformed into something resembling a spiky 𝗧𝗪𝗧. She never really had a dinosaur phase, and charged into battle with her clinging to his head for dear life as he ran down the street of the exam cityscape. At least she kept a clear enough mind to remember not to touch his horns with her thumb pads. She did not want to ride a floating dinosaur. It appeared this caught everyone else by surprise as well, as none of the other students had even tried exiting the starting room before Ochako and Izuku spotted 4 robots. With a bellow, he rammed into the group, smashing 2 of them and impaling a third one on his nose horn. The 4th robot seemed to stare with pained resignation as Izuku reared up and brought his weight down on it, crushing it flat. Suddenly there was a puff of vapor and Ochako was back on her feet, standing behind a tanuki boy and clinging to his hair. She was quick to release his hair and step back as he turned with a smile. Well, she guessed he did get her a head start. Then he looked past her and pointed. "Got some robots over there for ya," he cheerfully stated. "Hope to see you in class." Then he pulled another leaf from his jacket and slapped it to his head. Another puff of vapor later, he transformed into a smaller dome-headed dinosaur and rushed off further into the exam grounds. Ochako shouted a quick thank you before turning and rushing the group he pointed out. She slapped each one before tossing them skyward. The 5 robots flailed helplessly before she returned their gravity. All the robots screamed as they fell, impacting the ground with enough force to shatter. That was an easy 7 points. Now to find more. 𝗫𝗓 sat with the other teachers as they watched the different monitors showing the exam sites. He smiled as he looked between them all, looking at the different teams. This was especially fun as he viewed the applicants one way while his staff all had their individual viewpoints. Combining their opinions made a cohesive picture of the kids, and 𝗫𝗓 loved putting them together. "We got some exciting kids this time around," Powerloader gestured to a screen showing a redhead punching robots. "Certainly combat capable," 𝗧𝗪𝗧 chuckled at a bestial boy tearing through a 3-pointer. "Don't forget the sneaky ones," Midnight pointed at a screen with an invisible teen flipping the off switches on robots. All Might, who was watching but not allowed to judge for points, smiled as he watched 𝗂𝗄𝗃 use his drill quirk to puncture another robot's eye. "Okay," Mike groaned, "but are we all gonna ignore the fact one of the students from my area turned into a freaking dinosaur?" He pointed at another screen, showing a large dinosaur 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, a club-like tail to smash a few robots. Seriously, he started as a spiky one, then he turned into a small runny one, and now he's that thing. "He started as a styracosaurus," Snipe calmly replied, "then turned into a stegosaurus and now he's a euoplocephalus." Every teacher slowly turned to look at Snipe. Somehow the hero managed to look indignant through his mask. "Come on, guys, knowing dinosaurs is like the 3rd most American thing. More American than football." All Might smirked. "In my experience, American football is actually around the 5th most American thing. You two can have a man-off later," 𝗫𝗓 laughed as he grabbed a small remote with a huge red button on it. 2 more minutes. Izuku, now back in his tanuki form, stretched his arm to WHP a rock into a 1-pointer's face. He gave a laugh after it tipped over. He honestly didn't think that would work. He looked around for more robots, and saw a pair of applicants to his right. One looked a bit like a lizard to him, if a lizard sprouted blades. The other teen looked like he was made of metal. What fun, Izuku almost wished he had his notebook. As he thought this, he heard something. Looking to his left, he could hear a large group of robots coming their way. They were around the corner and down the street a bit, so he was pretty sure the two boys couldn't hear them. Looking around, Izuku saw a pair of convenient light poles were still intact. That gave him an idea he'd been dying to try out. "Ichiwai," he shouted to the other two boys. "You guys wanna help me with something?" Confused, the Blade and Iron teens walked his way while Izuku stretched out one of his arms, looped it around one of the light poles and stretched it back, forming two bands going across the street. "Blade guy, you're the ammunition. Iron kid, think you could grab my arm and stretch it back?" "Dude, your arm is a slingshot," the Iron kid gawked. "Are there even any robots that way?" the lizardy knife kid asked. "I can hear them around the corner," Izuku shouted. "Come on, a big group coming from the right." Figuring they had nothing to lose, the Iron kid grabbed Izuku's arm and began pulling it back while the knife kid jumped on and held onto his arm. The sudden weight almost made Izuku tip over, but he braced himself against the opposite pole. "How long do I gotta hold this?" Iron kid asked, straining from the pressure. "Hold on." Izuku closed his eyes, focusing on his hearing. He heard the two boys gasp, but kept listening to the robots. "Hold on, fire." At that shout, the metal boy let go of Izuku's arm, letting it snap into place. Doing so launched the Blade boy through the air. He was almost caught by surprise when he flew into the group of robots Izuku had been hearing. He made quick work chopping them to shreds. When he was done, all three boys cheered. "I can't believe that worked." Izuku laughed. "That was so manly." Iron Teen almost broke out into tears. "I wanna do it next." "I ain't pulling you," Blade shook his head. "Time's almost up," Izuku announced. "We'd better pick off any stragglers. Get into hero course and we can do it again." With a thumbs up from the other two, Izuku rushed off the other way. He was listening for more robots, but instead heard a deep rumbling. Before he could even question what it was, the ground began to shake. Then he heard a loud roar as the ground exploded a few blocks away. "I think that's the 0-pointer, he whispered to himself. He turned around and saw a few other kids standing in shock. "Run! It's the 0-pointer and it sounds freaking huge." Needing no second warning, Izuku and the other students all ran down the street, away from the oncoming explosions. One such explosion was especially large, and actually made some buildings crumble while shaking Izuku and a few students off their feet. Izuku got back to his help. Izuku's gaze shot towards the source of the shout. Back down the street, a good half-block away, someone was pinned under debris from a collapsed building. He gasped when he realized it was Ochako, the nice girl from earlier. Looking further, the 0-pointer emerged from the dust and smoke. Izuku wasn't sure the robot had seen Uraraka, and didn't want to risk her getting crushed. While everyone else fled from the machine, Izuku rushed back down the street to his pinned acquaintance. "Are you alright?" Izuku asked as he started yanking rocks off her. "Can you use your quirk?" "I can't reach the bigger pieces," Uraraka groaned, "and I've been using my quirk this entire time." "Not sure I can dash." Another stomp from the 0-pointer almost knocked Izuku off his feet again. The Tanuki teen gave a whine. "Alright, I have an idea," Izuku said as he pulled out one of his last leaves. "Just please don't freak out." He slammed it against his head and disappeared in a puff of vapor. Ha ha ha. "I am here." Uraraka's eyes widened with shock as All Might himself was suddenly standing in front of her. He bore his signature smile as he gazed up at the robot. Without looking down, 𝐒𝐻𝐵 leaned down and grabbed the heaviest piece of debris off of her. He hoisted it up, freeing Ochako and aiming at the robot. "Hey, robot. You got something in your eye." He pulled his arm back. "My rock." He hurled the rock with all the strength he could muster. It nailed the robot square in the center of its eye, tearing through the head and out the back like an artillery round. The robot stopped moving before tipping backwards, away from the students. Speaking of the students, everyone still in the area was frozen in shock. Uraraka was the only one who saw Izuku's transformation, meaning everyone else thought All Might just randomly appeared in the exam site and stopped the robot. It took the others a bit longer to notice the prone brunette. Before anyone could react, the end of exam alarms went off while 𝐒𝐴 knelt down and looked at Ochako. "Are you injured?" I think I sprained my ankle," the girl whined. At that statement, the transformed applicant gently picked Ochako up and leaped back to the entrance area. There was no doubt he startled a lot of teens when he just appeared at the large doors. Thankfully, there were a lot of medic robots arriving on site. He gently laid Ochako on one of the gurneys and let the robots carry her away. Izuku sighed before getting swamped by a bunch of teens. "I can't believe you're here, All Might," one screamed. "Are you one of the judges?" another asked. "Can I have an autograph?" a third raised a notebook. Everyone. Izuku laughed, raising his hands. "Before you get too excited, there's something you should all know." He reached up and plucked the leaf that sat between his antennae. One puff of vapor later, and the students looking up at the hero suddenly found themselves looking down at the fuzzy teen. "I'm not All Might. I could just..." Yeah, there was silence, before the room exploded with excitement again. "Holy CRP, that is an awesome quirk," one guy shouted. "Can you transform into other heroes?" "Wait, are you the dinosaur kid from Dash?" Izuku sighed and scratched the back of his neck. He was gonna be stuck here for a while. The teachers in the observation room all stared in abject shock. It had been almost 2 minutes since Izuku saved Ochako, and the teachers were still silent. Most of them had dropped jaws, including All Might himself. Netsu, meanwhile, smiled and let the silence last a good couple minutes. "Well, now," the rodent-like principal smirked, "I think we've found our mystery shapeshifter."